Mhm.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello Jr.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Parent.
This will be the last episode of the year, and so as we look forward to 2015 from the past 2014, it felt like a good time to talk about this great adventure path that Paizo has been putting out for the last 6 months. The Iron Gods Adventure Path, which has Pathfinder Society tie-ins and a lot of material taking place in Numeria, which is the sword and laser section of Golarion, the sometimes controversial sword and laser section of Golarion. Well, to help you deal with that controversy, we have the writer of one of the first Pathfinder Society scenarios of the season that was set in, or that was influenced by Numeria, and the writer of the 6th part of the Iron Gods Adventure Path, the Divinity Drive, Crystal Frasier, is back on the show. Welcome back, Crystal.
Hi, everybody.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be back.
It's nice to have you back. You're fun. I like fun.
And I feel like you don't have enough plant lady representation, on the show.
This year we tried to diversify our guests, and the one person on the list that we hadn't had on yet was a plant lady. But yeah, well, it's good to have you back, Crystal. And why don't we just dive right into? You got all this Numeria-related material. Was this on purpose? Are you known as the sword and laser expert?
I am very much the sword and laser and sci-fi geek, or at least the one that James Jacobs seems to trust, because I think our brains are broken in the same way.
So what is it about sci-fi and what is it about fantasy mixing with your sci-fi that you like so much?
Oh, I am a child of the early 80s, so my first introductions to science fiction were He-Man and She-Ra and, well, a lot of fairy tales, but those don't have a lot of sci-fi elements, and a lot of Star Wars. So all these very, like you said, sword and laser stories. And I've just sort of always associated high adventure with big, muscly barbarians fighting robots.
We need more fairy tales with lasers.
I agree.
Like Little
I don't
Red
think we
Riding.
need to give
bowcaster.
fairies lasers. This ends badly. So I know that a lot of people like to draw a hard line between the fantasy and sci-fi genres, and other people seem to think there is no line between the sci-fi and fantasy genres. Where do you fall in on that argument?
I I didn't grow up with traditional Tolkien fantasy, so for me, fantasy is basically whatever's fun. I came in through a lot of fairy tales, and then, like I said, He-Man and She-Ra and Thundar, and just little bits and pieces and this and that from all over the place. Lots of Narnia and Wizard of Oz, and Wizard of Oz has its own 19th century sci-fi elements as well.
It's true. I guess the Tin Man is he's a lot more sci-fi than he is fantasy.
Yeah, he's pretty much a cyborg. And the later books have more weird science bits and bobs in them.
Yeah, I know I never really realized that He-Man wasn't just straight fantasy until years later when I was like, wait a second. What was the robot horse? And there was a lot of robots and lasers, and Man-at-Arms was really just like, he did not fit in alongside just loincloth-wearing He-Man barbarian.
No.
Completely completely incomprehensible vehicle movements.
Yep.
Yeah, and then in She-Ra you had basically the Horde was just a legion of evil invading robots led by a shape-shifting wizard cyborg.
Poor guy. I recently saw the UK commercials for He-Man were a lot more on the nose than the American ones. And so there was one for Hordak, and it was just, Hordak, 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 Hordak. Like, heavy metal team that's just repeating his name, showing you different angles on the action figure. It was amazing.
That sounds awesome. I have homework for tonight.
You do have to see these too. All right, so you mentioned shape-shifting lizard cyborgs. Can you tell us a little bit about the Iron Gods Adventure Path, sort of its elevator pitch for the listeners who don't know much about it? And does it include any cyborg shape-shifting lizards?
It doesn't have any cyborg shape-shifting lizards, but it does have some cyborg shape-shifting clerics.
Oh,
Uh,
Pretty close.
Almost as
so
good.
the pocket pitch or the elevator pitch for the Iron Gods adventure path is you got my sci-fi in your or you got your sci-fi in my fantasy. It is exploring a crashed spaceship in Numeria, which is basically our swords and barbarians Conan inspired wilderness land,
When you said
and you're
Conan
trying to
inspired.
stop an
No, go ahead.
you're trying to stop an evil, insane computer god from launching itself into orbit and taking control of the world. Of course.
Would it be that bad if we were ruled by a computer god?
Uh, I guess it depends on who. I mean, is it like a benevolent computer god, or is it like Google?
Oh, wow. What are you saying about Google? Keep in
Wait.
mind they're listening.
And goodbye, folks. We're off the air.
Probably have a lot of listeners who work at Google, and I am going to get some hate mail in the morning.
No. Who could hate you, Crystal? Come on. We do have a question from the audience, so I will just remind people that anyone that is watching us live on YouTube, welcome. And if you have any questions for Crystal about Iron Gods, about really anything we talk about, you can just post it in the comments section. We refer to it as our chat, but it's the comments. And the first question is from Ivanka Thalma, who asked, maybe it's weird, but I don't know, but I don't mind as much with laser guns and real-world guns. Maybe because I don't... All right, sorry, I usually summarize these. How do you feel about laser guns in fantasy versus traditional, black powder guns?
I'm mostly a fan of whatever's fun for your group, and for you as a GM, run with it. So if black powder weapons make your game a lot more fun and everybody's having a good time, I say run with it. If nobody's really enjoying it or it feels like it's breaking the flavor, there's plenty of other things to draw on.
I wonder how many gunslingers made it into an Iron Gods campaign, because I know rules-wise they're great with the lasers, but it does feel weird having somebody with a revolver shooting at the robots.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it would be awesome to have cowboys versus robots.
Yeah, but...
After half the tables I've sat at in PFS at Gen Con, man, I throw out anything weird in Pathfinder, period.
I think one of the objections could be that Iron Gods is really supposed to be this split.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be fantasy on one side, sci-fi on the other. And then you've got this later Victorian era stuff just kind of bridging the gap, and it's like, oh, but it's better without a bridge.
Yeah, I think it might be because we have black powder weapons in the real world, but we don't have laser guns and laser swords. So people might be more willing to accept fantastic technology as part of their fantasy than they are to accept modern technology.
Now, you summarized Iron Gods as an adventure path, and I know since you're doing the last part, the summary between your specific adventure and the entire adventure path is probably thinnest of all of the parts. But what specifically are the players? What's the objective in the Divinity Drive?
In the Divinity Drive, you finally find an entrance to the Silver Mount, which is the massive mountain in the center of Numeria that is actually a crashed alien spaceship. And you are exploring the interior of this ship where almost nobody has been before, and encountering weird aliens and robots and trying to find the lair of the insane computer god so you can end the threat to Galarian once and for all.
The Silver Mount is kind of the most intriguing thing about all of Numeria, and the fact that you actually get to explore it. Was that exciting? Did it make you nervous?
Oh, that was terrifying, because Numeria is one of the things that originally drew me to Galarian as a path, or as a setting. So the Silver Mount was basically one of maybe 3 things that really drew me into Pathfinder. And then James pulls me aside and says, "Crystal, I want you to write about the interior of the Silver Mount." So I kind of peed my pants a little.
Did you get a tight outline, or did you get a lot of leeway?
I had a ton of leeway with this adventure. So it was basically you have to have the evil computer in the end, and he's about to get himself into orbit, and we want part of it to be like a Tron style going inside the computer to fight the computer god thing. And that was about it for my guidance.
Cool. So yeah, that's a lot of space to fill. So how did you know what had to be in there, and how did you balance it all out?
Some of it was just from reading what we were putting in the earlier adventures and trying to have some wrap up or some conclusion from that. Kisatha, the alien, four-armed alien race, show up a few times in the adventure path, so we wanted to have something like that in there. And James and I discussed a little bit about what was going on with the ship before it crashed, so I had some guidelines for what might be found in there. And aside from that, I just kind of went a little bonkers. Like, I tried to make sure we had some things in there that were pure Star Trek references, and a couple of things in there that were just totally alien, and I had to put a little bit of my own weirdness, so you find well, I don't want to put in too many spoilers, but you find some very strange things in addition to the solid sci-fi tropes. So I hope people will like it. Oh, and while we're talking about things I put in here, last time I was on No Direction, we had a very serious discussion about including a clockwork octopus in an adventure.
The Clocktopus.
Yes, this adventure features a clocktopus.
Yes! Oh, octopus. Well, that brings us up to the question I had. Is there's got to be tons and tons of different flavors of sci-fi and like various subgenres of sci-fi. How did you what versions and genres of sci-fi go into Iron Gods, and where'd you draw the inspiration for it?
I was trying to keep my corner of Iron Gods, at least. I was trying to keep it fairly Star Trek, kind of limited to the things you would have seen in Star Trek and Star Trek Next Generation, which gives me a lot of leeway to play with. I did get to put in a godlike energy being, and I was happy with that.
Benevolent?
Oh, God, no. How many of those did they run into in Star Trek, and how many were benevolent?
Well, some of them were misunderstood.
There are also a lot of giant robots, because that is what the Iron Gods path is all about. And that's pretty close to what I tried to stick with. I also pulled some inspiration from Expedition to Barrier Peaks, which I imagine every author on this adventure path did. And I also got to add an encounter with Warden robots, who are physical training combat robots.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if anybody remembers those, but they were my favorite part from Expedition to Barrier Peaks.
Actually,
I'm afraid I've never got to.
in it.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, in the original adventure from the 80s, you can find the crashed spaceship's gym, and the physical training robots will either fight you or get in a fight with each other, depending on how you interact with them. So I got to put a little homage to that in there. A little bit of love to first edition.
We've talked a lot about how you're a big fan of cartoons from the 80s and 90s. One of them that I was completely unaware of was Captain Simeon and the Space Monkeys.
God, yes.
Did any references to that make it into your adventure?
Yes-ish. I didn't put anything overt in, but I took a little bit of inspiration from the main villain in the show. There's
his brains like Ebola?
Oh, no, his the villain who employs that villain is a sentient galaxy named Nebula.
We've got a little bit of Nebula somewhere in the adventure.
Yes, he's not quite a full galaxy, but there is sentient light in the adventure path.
But what about, why stop there? Why not throw in a full encounter with space monkeys?
You know, that's a damn good question, and I feel like I've fallen down on the job. I guess on my next adventure, I'm going to have to figure out a way to put in a town full of monkeys.
Make them space monkeys, even if it has nothing to do with them.
Yeah, I'm sure Rob will appreciate that. Oh
Well, I
well,
mean,
not my problem.
you've got a whole area ruled by a Gorilla King. We can give some of these gorillas space lasers.
I think monkeys would be cuter.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's the
Monkeys
space radiation. Clears up their complexion.
Yeah, the space template gives them much nicer complexion.
We've got
to a question from Darren Kaldemeyer in chat. He says, were there anything that you wanted to include in the AP that you didn't?
It's always hard asking about talking about some of the developmental processes for these, because I turn in the adventure sometimes a year before it's finally published.
Wow.
You know? I can think of a few encounters and such that I had to clip for time, or for word count, rather.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember anything specifically that I wanted to throw in that I just couldn't figure out a way to work in. There was an alien bounty hunter race I wanted to put in. There's a supplement for Pathfinder called It Came from the Stars. Or It Came from Beyond the Stars. No, It Came from the Stars. And it was basically how to take your Pathfinder campaign into sci-fi, into deep space, without necessarily making it science fiction. So, but there's an alien bounty hunter race in there that I thought that was a lot of fun and really wanted to include, but couldn't figure out a way to make it work. Plus, I was already using another monster from that book, and I didn't want to make it look like I was trying to sell more copies.
Oh, the opposite. It means if somebody's got that book, they're getting more value out of it.
Well, they should pick up a copy anyway, especially if you want to take your Iron Gods campaign into space. Because I think it's a very good book.
Now, it sounded like you guys had a whole lot of freedom to work with the crazy here. When you all were, how closely did you work with the rest of the team on this for the other parts of the AP, and how much crazy ideas were being batted back and forth?
I had a lot of involvement with James Jacobs, just because I had the benefit of, he just lives over there. We're like 5 minutes from each other. But the rest of the team, not so much. This was before anybody had actually told me that there are freelancing forums where we can get together and bang our heads together for ideas. So I really wish I'd known that and could have taken a little more inspiration from other people's work. But I did do a lot of... James Jacobs and I had a lot of sit-down discussions about what was in Numeria and what made sense to be on this spaceship versus, what was just completely out there and not associated with these particular aliens. And just sort of went back and forth on the lore a lot. And I actually feel like I got a little bit of input on official Galarian lore, especially regarding aliens, so I feel kind of awesome.
How did you weave it into the story?
A couple of things I specifically got to do was, the Silver Mount is home to a bunch of gargoyle tribes, so I got to specifically spell that part out. Also, tons of oozes because of, alien space slimes, and also because strange mutant chemicals and whatnot.
Of course.
And some of the lore about the starship itself sort of morphed over the course of those discussions, and I don't really think I can take too much credit for that personally. I think it was just more and more James and I bouncing ideas off each other, but I think most of the really good ideas from that were probably his. But still, it was fun to be a part of the discussion.
Becca Thalma has another question about collaboration. She wants to know if you talked with Tim Pratt at all, who wrote Reign of Stars, which is the Pathfinder Tales novel that ties into the Iron Gods.
I have not, no. Ooh, I've not seen the cover for that yet. That looks nice.
It is Alchemist versus a robot shooting a laser at him.
Well, that is what robots do.
Robots and lasers. I am going to be reviewing it earlier, but I'll give you just a heads up that if you read nothing else, read the first chapter, because it's the best first chapter in a Pathfinder Tales novel.
Nice.
It's just amazing. It's so much
Well, one of the other things that was really special about the Iron Gods AP is a lot of the other APs have sort of semi-tied into other rules sections of the book. It's like no secret that a lot of Jade's Regent leaned heavily on a lot of the Asian stuff coming out of Ultimate Combat and the bestiary that came out at the time. Obviously, Wrath of the Righteous leaned very heavily on the Mythic Handbook. And those were things that were obviously helping. That was a mutually beneficial relationship there. This seems to be like the first time they've ever had to go, hey, listen, we've got too much crazy stuff. Here's a rule book just to handle this adventure. How did that relationship work for you?
It was really nice to see because, as I've said before, I'm kind of a sci-fi geek and like mixing some sci-fi into my fantasy. I've got some notes converting Kingmaker into a post-apocalyptic campaign. So it's nice to get the rules for weird technology and alien technology, and I like that we know that we can make an adventure path built on weird ideas still work without putting out an entire hardback book. It makes it easier for us to, well, I shouldn't say us, I'm not a Paizo employee, but it means you don't need a more expensive commitment to make an AP work. So Paizo doesn't need to put together a hardback book, which costs a lot more than a 64-page campaign setting book.
That actually lines up well with something Eric Mona said last episode, because Occult Adventures is coming out next Gen Con, and none of the adventure paths before it or after it have anything to do with the occult. And he basically said that we don't want to force the hardcover people to base their entire schedule around what the APs are doing. So it sounds like they're just looking for a little bit more freedom so that everyone can just kind of have their own fun in their own design space.
Yeah, that is nice to hear. And I can say that it is kind of tricky to try and write an adventure when you don't know all the rules you have to use. So if, for example, if you're writing a science fiction adventure path and the rules for science fiction are only a rough draft, it makes you a little self-conscious about the amount of errors you'll make.
But did you also get to say, like, oh, I really want to arm this guy with a cattle prod. You guys need a cattle prod in the technology book.
I probably could have, but I'm very shy about making demands like that. I'm like, oh god, they won't like me if I make demands.
You know what can help?
I think they
you
might be
with
like,
the shot?
why didn't we think of that? A cattle prod!
So no, I didn't really have any input on the technology guide. I did get to make some sweet artifact level robot arms, though.
Ooh.
Artifact robot arms?
Yes. You get them off of the High Priest of the evil computer god. She has artifact level robot arms.
Oh goodness! I mean, that's
Things just chopping off player characters' arms?
Well, it's a head of Vecna scenario.
oh goodness. Oh,
Gonna see how many. Gonna see how. Oh, sorry.
No, I interrupted.
Oh, I was gonna say. I want to see how many player characters will lop off one arm and then figure out they can't lop off the other one on their own.
Mark Townsend asks, what was your favorite NPC in the AP and why?
Oh, ooh, that's a hard one. I got to create a bunch of cool NPCs for this one because I'm a sucker for sandbox scenarios, and I did everything I could to turn this dungeon crawl into a sandbox scenario.
Laser sand.
Yes, laser sand. Whew. You know what? I'm gonna play it safe and say that my favorite NPC was the one I wrote based on my wife. So there is a. I'm trying to remember. We had to rename her. So her name is Scylla, and you find her in the first level of the ship. She's basically part of the Technic League crew that was in the ship that got stranded when the shit hit the fan. So she can either be somebody you fight or an ally you team up with, depending on your feelings on the Technic League, which will be strained at that point in the adventure path, I imagine.
Yeah, who's on the Technic League side?
Well, she's mostly on a I want to get the hell out of here alive side. So she's not evil. She's just medium evil.
And what does
I
that
like
say
that.
about your wife?
That my wife is medium evil.
All right. As
I
long as
like
you're
my
okay with
evil
that.
medium
We've had
rare.
this discussion before. My wife and I mean.
That
Our
actually
relationship.
brings up. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, our relationship is healthy enough to acknowledge that we're both a little evil.
So, sci-fi can be a lot of things. It can be just zany laser sword adventures, and you did say that you used Star Trek as a reference. It can be very social commentary. So, did you use Iron Gods as an opportunity to kind of lay out any kind of social commentary on, the world?
I did get to set up a little bit of a Heart of Darkness situation on one of the levels of the ship. I might have also put in a crazy computer cult, very reminiscent of Paranoia. I don't know if you've ever played that.
I know it
I
is.
hope you have.
Mhm.
Uh, so
Yes.
just a.
I'm afraid that yes, I love Friend Computer.
So yes, there's a level where you have to be careful not to be treasonous, and another level where you have to stop a crazed dictator. And I didn't really try to make any specific messages. I'm more of the opinion that a GM would be able to handle that better for their group, and what I can do is put in positive individual situations rather than a huge arc. But I understand everybody's going to have a different perspective on that.
Now, how is riding a spaceship? I guess it might be a trick question, but different from riding a normal dungeon crawl. I mean, the crashed spaceship has got to leave some interesting opportunities for architecture and/or encounter space.
Uh, it you've still got a ton of freedom. You just have to say instead of a wizard did it, the engineering crew did it. Um, it's it did give me some opportunities to say, well, what about in the maintenance shafts? Because you always go into the maintenance shafts in Star Trek and in Star Wars and bits like that. There are a couple of encounters that were based around maintenance shafts, and unfortunately, those had to get cut. I might end up putting them on my fan page once the book releases, just in case people want to add them back in. Unfortunately, one of the truths of writing is your favorite encounters always have to get cut for space, because usually your favorite encounters aren't the ones that relate directly to the plot.
You could always talk to the guys at Legendary Games. They like to do plugins to flesh out stories, and they tend to work with the people who write the adventure paths to unofficially tie into the adventure paths. That's Neil Spicer and Jason Nelson. And
Yeah, I've talked to them before. I can just never manage to think of good products for them.
And yet, right there, you're sitting on a product you were going to give away for free. Oh, why did I consider that?
Oh, right.
Oh yeah, but my fans are worth it.
Oh,
My fans are the smartest, most intelligent, best-looking fans out there.
and I'm your biggest fan.
Well, I thought that went without saying, seeing as how handsome and intelligent you are.
And freakishly tall.
He is freakishly tall. Oh my god.
I'm like barely 6 foot tall. I don't know where the people get this idea. That
There
I'm
are
freakishly
not a
tall.
lot of men I have to look up to.
You only have to look a little bit up. You're like nose level with me, aren't you?
I'm 6 feet tall, and I had to look up at you, so.
Maybe I was wearing my heels.
So another question I have that ties into the Star Trek relation to this is, on our loot sheet, will we have an abundance of red shirts?
Oh, how did I not think of that? Oh, I wondered. I mean, the books are printed already, but I wonder if it's too late to get an edit.
And
Oh.
change every single copy. Going with
Oh.
add red to the art.
I need to talk to you guys before I write the adventures.
Well, then
See,
this
'cause
ties in nicely with
I got the Clocktopus from you, and that was brilliant.
Darren Goldmeyer wants to know about your future AP plans, so we can help you out now. What are
Oh.
you doing after this?
Well, I have already written and turned in an adventure for the upcoming adventure path, Hell's Rebels, or as I like to nickname it around the house, Hell's Bells. I'm writing the very first adventure in that adventure path, which was terrifying and awesome all at the same time. It is called In Hell's Bright Shadow, and it
Awesome
features the PCs as citizens of Kintargo when martial law is declared, and things hit the fan.
Kintargo is in Cheliax, I'm assuming? I don't
Oh,
know.
yes, Kintargo is a city in northwestern Cheliax.
So, is all of the adventures in this going to be named after what would be awesome metal albums?
Oh, I really, really hope so. Where's my guide? I think I've already filed away my writer's guide for that tells me the titles of all the other adventures.
All right, so if you do now, the Hell's Rebels is going to be one of the ones that contains episode 100 of the APs. Did that put any extra pressure on you that there's going to be a lot of eyes on this one?
Well, it didn't until just now. I am not writing number 100. James Jacobs will be writing that. He'll be returning to AP writing for that one. I did have to twist his arm to make sure he included at least one or two things in there for me. So I hadn't really thought about this AP being a big one that everyone will have their eyes on, but when I was about to turn it in, my loving wife did mention, "Oh, this will be the AP that drops at Gen Con, won't it?"
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
we're going to probably celebrate this one on the show lots when it drops.
So yeah, I gave it another edit pass after she said that.
And of course, part 1 is the one that most people play of the adventure path, so there's a lot of pressure on there.
No.
I mean, you're going to set the whole scene and flavor of everything to come after it.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz on this one. So
I mean, my group's talking about quitting what they're doing just to play this one.
You guys really want me to have a panic attack right here on the air, don't you?
Well, it's not like you can do much about it now. You've already turned it in. I mean, it always amazes me how crazily early you guys do this stuff. I mean, not like all the text is done, and you haven't got any of the art yet because all the text is like a year early. I mean, how do they come back to you and say, how many arms did this lizard creature have again?
No, Paizo's pretty good about figuring out what their authors intend and running with it. So I don't actually. I get the occasional notes back and ask or requests for updates when I'm writing campaign setting material, like Inner Sea Races. I was working on that and got some feedback. The Harrow Handbook that released a few months ago, I got some feedback and some requests to rewrite some bits of that.
well, that one's a little more esoteric than your average book, too.
It is. But
you only write the strange stuff.
Sorry, what?
You only write the strange stuff.
I I have been told that I am I have a sense of humor, and that is what they value from me. So yeah, I got to write the Harrowing and the Harrow Handbook, and just the weird adventures for whatever reason. They trust me to do weird.
Is in Hell's Bright Shadow weird?
I don't think it's weird. I think it makes perfect sense. Some of the encounters might seem a little weird. I don't know how much I want to spoil on this, but I got to use some really weird monsters that are some of my favorites that never really appear in anything. I also got to invent a really weird monster that is just a wandering monster. It's just going to be in the bestiary in the back of the book rather than the adventure itself, uh, which I think I can go ahead and spoil. I invented the sinkhole slime, which is basically an ooze whose main attack is slithering under you and suddenly being a pit.
Oh boy. I love slimes. I love slimes to pieces. I can't wait to get a hold of this.
And well, there is a scene where the player characters will have to sing and dance to not be arrested. So
Nice. Oh, great.
it's going to be very sandboxy. It's going to be. I learned a lot about sandbox style adventures doing Empty Graves, and I used all the notes from that to put together Hell's Bright Shadow, or in Hell's Bright Shadow.
How did you shift gears from writing an Iron Gods adventure path to writing a very social, just very different adventure path from that one?
Lots of Netflix. Netflix helps a lot. We watched Game of Thrones in between working on Iron Gods and working on Hell's Bright Shadow. So that helped change my mood around and update my perspective on what to put in adventures.
So we're not supposed to trust any NPC in this adventure, then?
Well, you can trust NPCs. I'm just not going to tell you which ones.
And any cartoon influence managed to make it into this one?
You know, I'm not cartoon influence. There's some Hellraiser influence at one point.
Okay, the opposite, but all right.
Nice.
So that is pretty classically 80s.
And what are some of the Netflix shows that you were watching that got you in the right mood?
Dexter put me in a good mood for this,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is the first time the phrase Dexter put me in a good mood has ever been uttered. What else have I been watching? I have such a terrible memory. Bits of Labyrinth, but I watched Labyrinth before writing every AP, so...
Good.
I think the big one we obsessed about right beforehand was Game of Thrones, so there's a little bit of that in there, plus it sort of helped reset my brain from science fiction to fantasy.
So, watching Labyrinth, is that just part of a tradition, or is there something core to it that really puts you in an adventure path mood?
It just really sort of helps put me in the adventure path mood. I just grew up with it. I mean, the first time I saw it, I was younger than Jennifer Connelly, and I was like, I don't understand anything that's going on here. And then I was Jennifer Connelly's age, and I'm like, she makes perfect sense. Of course, everything she's doing makes sense. And then now I'm the age of her parents in the movie, and I'm like, wow, Jennifer Connelly is just a whiny little kid. And I guess seeing it from all three of those perspectives has helped it. I don't know, it makes me feel like I can put myself in more perspectives writing after seeing that. I feel like I'm completely rambling and insane right now. Am I being rambling and insane?
No.
Only
that's
in
great.
the
I think this movie has just been a part of me for so long that it just kind of switches on the part of my brain that considers reality.
Well, if you think about it, it really is the perfect Pathfinder movie because it has singing goblins in it.
It does have singing goblins.
Switching gears a little bit, in the Pathfinder Society adventure we were talking about, the Silver Mount collection, you got to redesign the Blackros Museum. Now, this is one of the more iconic locations in Pathfinder Society. It's shown up in dozens of, or maybe not dozens, but it's shown up in a good half dozen scenarios, and it's always used the same map. But now this one's going to be made into a map pack, and it's a complete redesign of the museum. So, like, how did you feel getting honored and getting the pressure of redesigning such an iconic location?
Well, like you said, it was an honor and it was a lot of pressure. John Compton specifically came to me because he really likes my maps, and for Gen Con this year, they wanted to redesign the Blackros Museum because even though they love it and it's an iconic location for Pathfinder, the map is very straightforward, and PCs who've played the scenarios before, you always know where some encounters will be, and then you know where the boss fight is going to be. So they wanted to mix that up. They wanted to give it a new floor plan. They wanted a museum interior that made a little more space for moving exhibits around, and they wanted a floor plan that was easier to sort of modulate for later adventures. So you wouldn't always have the boss fight in the tower. Sometimes you'd have the boss fight in the historical wing or in the basement that didn't get detailed here. And the whole point was to just give the Blackros Museum more options.
So it's funny that as much as we've seen the Blackros Museum, it sounds like they're investing into a much longer future for that same location.
Yeah, well, I keep saying we. John specifically wants to have at least one a year of, one Blackros scenario a year, was what I had been told. And they were afraid to use the same map anymore because it felt like the adventures were just sort of repeating themselves.
And I heard that you sent in like a wonderful, perfectly detailed map, and it was like 5 or 10 feet too big.
Yes, when I designed the original map, nobody had told me they decided to make a flip mat out of it. So I hadn't designed it to flip mat standards. So John came back after I'd drawn my very, very detailed map sketch, because I'm very anal about my map sketches, and I even put in little drawings of all the exhibits, and this is what the turnstile looks like, and over here's the coat closet with all the coats hanging up. And he said, "This looks great, but it's going to be a flip mat, so can you shrink this down and rearrange it so it'll flip or fit on a flip mat?" And so after I stopped crying, I I chopped it up in Photoshop and got it to fit in a flip mat.
Oh, okay. I was worried that you'd had to erase your fine details and actually had to redraw parts of it.
Well, it got chopped up a little, which it always hurts, but you just have to you have to be willing to change or vivisect anything you create.
Now, will my character, like, is the coat check mandatory? Because my cloak tends to give my characters bonuses to saves.
The coat check is not mandatory,
Nice.
but
Good policy.
street shoes are not allowed in the display halls.
But what about caltrops?
No, you need something with a soft sole, otherwise you're going to scuff the marble.
Oh, that's fair. Slippers are comfortable, at least.
And for God's sake, man, don't dress like you live in a drainage ditch.
But sometimes I have to live in a drainage ditch. I'm an adventurer.
Well, we have patrons to consider.
Oh gosh.
I'm like Nigel, and I'm starting to understand why Nigel just hates everyone.
Yeah. Nigel is a lot of fun to write. I hope I can do another Blackros scenario someday. Or at least a scenario where you have to team up with Nigel to do some ridiculous thing.
It's always great when you save him by the end, and then by the next time you see him, he hates you all over again.
I want to just have a day where you're following Nigel around with his family, because I can't imagine that's a healthy relationship.
So why aren't we receiving fundraising and patron mailing brochures from the Blackros Museum yet?
I'm pretty sure the Pathfinder Society intercepts all of your mail.
That's not cool.
Well, it's purely for your own protection.
Yeah, we lost our labor union, Ryan. This is not going to go well for us in the future.
Back to the audience. Darren Kaldemeyer wants to know if you'll be at PaizoCon this year.
That is currently the plan. Luckily for me, PaizoCon just happens like 30 miles from my house, and usually somebody from the Paizo staff is willing to buy me drinks, and I will go pretty much anywhere somebody is buying me drinks. Trying to save up to go to Gen Con this year, but yeah, freelancing is tons of fun, and it's been very, very lucrative, but it's kind of weird. It's a shift in how you have to figure out your finances, so saving for something like Gen Con is taking a little more figuring out.
Well, the fact that people could get a signature from the person who wrote the first part of this AP, I mean, could you do some kind of a fundraiser? Could you put a little pressure on Paizo to be like, people want me there?
Well, I could, but I don't know if people want me there.
Oh, of course they do.
I've been banned from the state of Minnesota.
So what?
What? It's okay. It's just Minnesota. Of course, talking like that is how I got banned.
Don't get us banned. I've never been to Minnesota. I don't plan to be, but I like the option to be open.
I wouldn't call going to Minnesota an option. Oh, now I'm going to get hate mail from people in Minnesota and Google.
I've already hated on Minnesota on this podcast once before, so we're not going in any new directions.
Well, I can always ask Paizo.
Yeah, I'm sure you could be a booth slave.
Oh, no. Besides, they have tons of free labor already to be booth slaves.
Bastille points out that your avatar, to him, looks like a watermelon golem.
No, a watermelon golem?
No,
no, she's a character I created back in art school called Nopalinda. She is just a happy little cactus girl.
Cactus.
Let's see, I have no idea if I have a way of sharing files with you.
them after the fact.
Yeah, we can put it in the show notes.
But yes, I have a full-sized one. But she's supposed to be a cactus, not a watermelon. It's a very important distinction.
Oh yeah,
Right,
I mean, you
Crystal,
don't
I think
eat
we're
one of them.
winding down now. Is there anything that you want to bring people's attention to?
Just super excited about, well, really excited about Divinity Drive, because I just got the PDF for that a couple of days ago and read through it, and I am always impressed with James Jacobs' ability to take my writing and turn it into something coherent. Blah, I make words for a living.
For part 6 of an AP, do you know how long before you start getting feedback from people that will be playing in it?
I don't know. I've never written one this far down the line. It was kind of scary doing an AP where all the threats had to be CR 14 or higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like people's last impression of Iron Gods is in your hands.
Yeah. I get to throw out a couple of Annihilator robots, and those are always fun. And Viper Vines, which are always fun.
Viper Vine.
It's okay. They're cuddly.
Oh, all right.
You know,
Yeah,
I know
right.
everybody worries when they hear the word viper. It's gonna be scary, but it's not a snake. It's not a snake. It's a bush. It's got flowers.
Is it
You
a
like
snake
it?
like bush?
No, it's very nice. You'll love it.
Okay. This is one of those Iceland situations where they named it something specifically to keep it to themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So when your GM says you see viper vines, you just walk up and give them a hug.
All right, Crystal, where can people find out more about you?
Well, I've got a Facebook fan page where I will hopefully be dropping some bits and pieces that have been cut from adventures either for space or because they didn't quite make sense. And I occasionally poke my head in there to remind people I'm still alive. I have my art blog at amazonchick at .tumblr.com. And that's chick as in CHIQUE.
Chic.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
chic.
it's the name I've been using online since late high school. So,
And Bastille says he lives in Minnesota, so is there somewhere he could direct his hate mail?
um, you know, send all your hate mail care of Wes Schneider, Paizo Publishing.
I just want Wes to get a weird email. What's with you hating on Minnesota?
Yes, everything I say has been completely approved by Wes, so that should buy me a few minutes.
I hope Wes is watching.
Oh, I hope he is watching. I hope everyone's watching. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Crystal. Good luck with the adventures. I'm sure they're all going to be super popular and sell very well, and everyone's going to love them.
Well, thank you very much, and it was a pleasure to be on again.
And hopefully I'll see you at PaizoCon.
Yep, great. Have a good time.
All right, take care, and we'll be right back with a little bit of banter right after this. So, Crystal, you can, well, do you want to hang out for the whole podcast, or if you've got important things to get to, you can just hit the thing that looks like a red phone receiver, and that'll disconnect you, but it'll keep the whole thing going.
Oh, I have a commission I need to finish for my mother-in-law, so I should get back to that.
Okay,
Important
this is still live. Does she know? Is this a Christmas commission?
Well, yes, she does know.
Okay. All right, take care.
All right, good to see you guys again.
You too.
Good to see you.
Well, we saw your avatar, your watermelon golem. Oh, good. Bastille's not going to send any hate mail. I'm going to like that comment. Thanks, Bastille. Param, you ready for some banter?
I am.
All right, cool. Starting in 3, 2, 1. This is the banter segment. We haven't had a straight banter segment in months, but it's awesome. There hasn't been a whole lot of news, although the first item almost feels newsworthy. We're going to jump right into it. It's Hero Forge. Hero Forge is a Kickstarter that we talked about maybe a year ago or earlier this year, where you could design your own miniature that would be 3D printed, and it's based on a wide variety of options. It launched earlier this month. It may still be technically in full beta because they are still looking for feedback, but it's kind of amazing. There's a lot of customizing options. You can do various races. You can do multiple elements of your face. And from the final figures, it looks like a lot of people will be able to make 100% unique miniatures, at least for years to come, and I expect there to be more options added as time goes by. You can find it at heroforge.com, and anyone that's watching us live, you can also tool around in it just because it's fun. Have you played with it yet, Param?
Oh yeah, yeah. As soon as it launched, I was like, click, 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 click. I mean, I wasn't in the Kickstarter for this one because I'll be honest. This was really ambitious, and things that have been this ambitious, especially things that include the phrase 3D printing, have crashed and burned in the past on a frequent basis. So this was going to be me wait and see if you all can pull this off, actually, thing. And I'm glad that they did. It seems that they did. I haven't seen a finished piece yet. I don't know if anybody that's actually has one of theirs ordered and delivered yet, though if you have, we would love to hear from you.
From what I understand, even the people that backed it, they're queued up to get their miniature, but none of them have been sent out yet.
Oh, okay. Like I know, like the people who backed it have had access to it for a little bit longer than the general public has had access to it. So I was wondering if any of them had already gotten it. But I really like it. I've messed with character creation software in the past, and usually the stuff that's available for tabletop use has been severely lacking compared to the same equivalent software that video games use by a large margin, and this sort of bridges that gap very nicely. No, not that I'm hating on anything like the Character Creator Pro or anything like that. I mean, those have been very useful. Hero Lab's been very useful, but this is different because it has a very practical application, uh, and it's super easy to use. It's actually very minimalist website. I mean, you click on the website and you're in the creator immediately. There's no intermediate step. It's here, start messing with this fantasy figure. Um, and I do like what they've got here, and I really am hoping they add a lot more because after creating like 4 or 5 different miniatures in this, I do start to get a bit of sameness feeling from them
Only four
because
or five, really.
yeah, because the tile set is nice, but there's only one staff that's made of wood. There's only one set of leather clothing. There's only one set of pure plate mail, and it has a male-female variant, but you get the idea. And messing around with that, I was able to like change things up, like flip in some sci-fi pieces on top of the fantasy pieces, because once you paint them, you're not going to know the difference anyway. Um, Things like that. And what they've got is a great initial offering, but I'm definitely hoping this keeps getting fleshed out. They keep adding more and more parts to this. I know they talked about a lot of the stuff in their stretch goals that they'd love to add to this, and I can't see that if they deliver the product that they say they're delivering. I cannot see this as not being financially successful as long as the math on the finances on their end works. Because I mean, I've what I've had to do to go out of my way to get just the right miniature has in the past been enormous. And I know that we've talked about how you've customed up miniatures before too. You end up buying 2 or 3 different miniatures, various chasing down various parts and add-ons and clipping things off GI Joes and just like modding these things out with green stuff. And the cost of the initial miniature would have to easily be greater than the 15 and 25 bucks they're asking for the 3D prints when you're done with these for the 1-inch scale. Though the price does get ridiculously expensive as soon as you make them any bigger than that.
Well, addressing your original concern that maybe there would be some, sorry, that we don't know, blah, okay. You were concerned about the final delivery of the product, but as far as I know, and I've worked with 3D printers before, the 3D printing part of it is fairly easy. This is the hard part, making this program, and this program works really fluidly. Like, you can just go from pose to pose, and the loading time is not very long. So I can screen share just, oops, not showcase. I'll screen share what I'm doing here. I can just start with a basic blank slate. Go into the head. My 2 favorite parts are the expressions. So here we go. We can start with a happy look and then just raise the R. Look at that guy. That is one happy dude.
I love the poses. They're so much more dynamic than you get.
That is my other favorite part. Yeah, and then you go into pose, and like they convey so much, and it's also like just by changing the expression, then the body language kind of adapts to the expression. And one of the things I was really impressed with is how some of the items interact with the pose. The one that I was most impressed was the spiked chain. So the spiked chain in the picture is just one long thing of chain, but it's always wrapping around and it's incorporated into the pose very well. So if we're going up here, we're going into some poses. That's not a very dynamic one. Let's get something really, here we go, the archer pose. But when it's given a spiked chain, suddenly the archer pose has a whole different meaning to it. And you can have 2 or 3 different miniatures in this same pose, and one of them with a bow will look completely different from how this one is looking. Let's go to the left hand and put something, let's put like a torch or something innocuous. A book? No, I don't like the book. There is a torch, right? Ooh, a fireball. There we go. We've got some kind of spiked chain magus. He'll, of course, need some clothes.
Deadly.
What's that?
He's a magus. The clothes are optional. Mage armor.
Well, he needs... All right, fine. Let's go back to clearing this out.
PG, PG, PG.
Wow, wearing absolutely nothing. I didn't know you could get that naked with your magus. But there we go. Within the right angle, We don't see anything untowards.
No, yeah, you can see this is really well done. I'm very impressed with what they put together, and I have all faith in them now. Uh, where at least I was skeptical before they launched the application. So, I mean, I'm assuming this is going to be success. I'm assuming that this success means it's going to grow. I mean, I've already ordered my first miniature on it, one for the Param character I play, because I always have a hard time finding. I have to kit bash everything I do for him as it is. So it's going to be nice to get something that just looks like him right off the bat. And like, I really wish they would have launched about 2 months earlier, if you get my meaning, because this would have been the perfect Christmas gifts for gamers.
Yep. Jeff in our group has made Hero Forge characters for everybody and was going to order them, but then kind of ruined the surprise because he wanted to make sure he got everyone's blessing and that the figures were exactly as they appeared. But basically, as a Christmas gesture, we'll call it, he is getting everybody in our group a Hero Forge based on their Rise of the Rune Lords character.
Ah, excellent.
But I think one of the really important things is that if you are going with a race that is less common, let's go with a female dwarf. There's not a whole lot of female dwarf figures out there. I'm going to go back to screen sharing. Now let's say it's a female dwarf bard. Well, with just the right pose, where's that really good singing one? That's a bit of a Snow White pose, so if we change her head so that she's a little bit happier, there we go. We've got Snow White as a dwarf. Rah! Maybe she's a little confused. So you can dress her up in more bard-appropriate clothing instead of just constantly getting these dwarven warriors that are kind of the default, and therefore it's the one that you're most expected to play if you're playing a dwarf character. And so it's the one that the miniatures for this kind of less represented race will all default to. But Hero Forge is great if you're making your gnomes, your halflings, your dwarves, the things that don't get as many miniatures from Reaper and from the major manufacturers. You can customize it and get just a perfect miniature representation on the table for your character. And I like it so much.
And we're talking about it from a Pathfinder point of view, but they also have a pretty robust sci-fi and Western setting choices for these, and there's also a little bit of Asian setting. So that's actually very useful for Pathfinder 2 because it genre blends so much. So I mean, like I know that like one of the things I would really like to see on here now that we've got the basics covered is like some lizard man heads, some kitsune heads, some of the more common animal races. You know, this is going to shine exactly as you said for races and character types that aren't common. I can't just get like human warrior number 66 from the Reaper line.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see. Well, there are chain swords, so if I was making Volter and I needed my Ripsaw Glaive, I mean, the chain sword's not the perfect representation, but it is still, it's closer to any other thing I've seen to the Ripsaw Glaive. And then we can just put a metal staff. Man, I just had like fun for 4 hours just playing around with the Hero Forge.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous thing. It's so much fun to make things in it, and then you have them, and then you're like, oh, do I want to buy this one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, crap. The costs on it are $15 for the basic miniature, but they say that they don't recommend painting that one because it's pretty rough around the edges. It's a really rough print. If you've messed with any 3D printed stuff, if you get like the default print rate on these, they're very lumpy and bumpy. And when you start to try and paint details on them, you notice those lumps and bumps pretty easily. They do have a fine one, like a fine print that is $25. And I think that's still pretty reasonable for like a completely custom kit. And then they also have like a 3-inch version and a 6-inch version of the same miniature, so you can get like huge and colossal size or gargantuan scaled versions of these guys. But that's when the price tag kicks up a bit because this is this is an expensive process. 3D printing is not a money-saving process to make items. It's just a way to make custom things.
Yeah, but if your go-to strategy for that Dwarf Magus that I just put together is enlarge person in the first round, then you can get 2 versions of miniature, the 25mm scale and a giant 6-inch, or maybe not 6-inch, but a giant 3-inch one to represent large Bat Magus.
Oh, a tip I do have for this one, for using the Hero Forge is you can delete the base. They have a default bases that you can choose from, but sometimes the characters clip through it for their different poses. And if that bothers you, you can actually delete the base before you send it off to print, and then mount it to your own bases. And that's also a good idea if you do like custom bases. Like I know I order a lot of those textured bases that like have like cobblestones or dungeon textures or floor planks already molded into the miniature bases, and I mount a lot of my minis to those types of things as it is. So I ordered, with except for one of the miniatures I'm wanting to order that has a really dynamic pose that I don't think would be mountable otherwise. I order them without the bases.
Cool. I had not thought of that. I just want to recommend people don't go with the $15 level. It may seem like you're saving a little bit of money, but it almost feels like they're apologizing for it on the page. Talking about how you shouldn't use it in your game because it might break. You shouldn't paint it because it will look bad. So I don't know what the purpose of that $15 level is, and I don't even think they should have offered it. They should really just set that $25 is the value of this, and it's a custom miniature, and if you do any customizing like I'm doing, you're easily spending $25 on getting your very specific figure.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of money making one miniature before. Now we will let you guys know when we get our miniatures in, and like how they looked, how they painted up, things like that, and keep you updated as this goes along. I expect good things.
And we do have a question from the audience. It's not a no question segment, although man, we are overdue for a no question segment.
Yes.
The new year will get back on schedule. Sorry, guys, we've kind of been spotty the last couple of months, but 2015, that's when I'm going to have a baby. Well, we'll see what happens in 2015. But Ivanka Thalma has a question for you, Param.
Okay.
I'm not too sure. So anyway, Ivanka wants to know, now that you finished your game room, anything on the table? Like, what's your next big project, I believe is what you're saying.
Oh, okay. Well, like, the stuff that's on the table is behind me. I mean...
Yeah, what's literally on that table, Param?
And to a side note, it's awesome having a game room where I can just leave the miniatures on the map where they were and just come back the next week and pick up right where they were. That is awesome. As far as projects I have on the table beyond this, right now, I haven't done a lot of work lately on my 3D dungeon terrain and stuff while I was working on the game room, and that's pretty much where I'm going to be looking to put my next bit of effort right now. The Fat Dragon stuff has had a couple of really relevant releases lately that have sort of revamped their entire product line to stuff that looks a lot better, that's going to be a lot neater. So, and now that I've got the game room to host it in, it's much easier to actually use things like 3D terrain and stuff. And I've shot up a few pictures of me using some 3D terrain in my games on my Facebook page in the game room already, and I just kind of want to expand on that for now. Beyond that, I'm doing some work I'm not allowed to talk too much more about with Parents Spellbook and other things like that. But I'm kind of wanting to enjoy the game room for a little bit more before I take on a project as massive as it again. Because let's face it, this thing was supposed to be 6 months and $2,000 and ended up being 3.5 years, and I'm not telling you how many thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I can't even picture a project as big as your game room. Like, what would the next thing on that scale even be?
Well, something similar would be like a really tricked out game table to go in the game room, which is on the wish list. But beyond that, I don't know. I mean, like, at that point, am I like making True Dungeon? Am I need to get involved with the latest LARP clubs and let's build a village? I mean, yeah, I don't know what
RV to just be a giant boule.
I could put a I mean, this thing's already portable. I mean, what's next? I
Put
don't
it
know.
on the road.
Man, having to. I don't know that I don't know that I can one up this one. I mean, it would be daunting, and I'm not sure I even want to attempt anything on this scale again. As much fun as it was, this was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in all literal and figurative terms.
To go back
There's
to your comment, go ahead.
I said there is my DNA in this building in several locations.
Going back to your comments about having a game table you can just leave between sessions, that was the status quo, because the game table's in the basement, and the basement's just the gaming room. But then while we were renovating our kitchen, the gaming table was also the cutting table. It was like the largest surface that we can do any actual work on. And so we were putting stuff away every week, and it was like, oh no, this is awful. This is like 30 minutes of just getting back to where we ended last week at the beginning of every session. So now that that's done, I appreciate it so much more having a dedicated gaming space.
Well, yes, dedicated gaming space is important. And I planned ahead for things like that occurring with the game room because I have the dedicated painting table and other tables to be yanked out in the case that we need to do work in here. And there's not going to be any reason that we have to clear off the dedicated gaming space at all. We're not going to need to disturb that when we have to do other gaming related activities in here.
How long do you think before you're just going to get the bug to do something big again?
That usually will happen over Christmas break is when I get the bug to do things, because that's me. Working at a school has its advantages, as you used to know, before you made the mistake of taking a permanent job in the game industry.
Not a mistake at all. Very happy.
It's very jealous, actually. When I'm sitting around with a whole lot of free time and nothing else to do, that's when I get inspired to hey, wouldn't it be neat if? And those words coming out of my mouth are disastrous to my finances and free time. I do need a cool new project, I know that, but I kind of want to batten down the situation here, but probably over this next Christmas break. So between this episode and the next episode our listeners hear, I will have started on some crazy thing. I have done so every year.
Well, keep us posted, because when you started this gaming room project, the ability to just share pictures wasn't quite as convenient as it is now. So you can make full blog, full photo journal about this, and whatever your next project is, I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
Thank
All
you.
right, we got a couple of different pointers in the banter outline. Which one do you want to talk about, Param?
Let's talk about your campaign.
Rise of the Rune Lords?
That got knocked off this, didn't it?
No. I've got 3 points on my list. The Occult Adventure playtest we did, Hacking Wrath of the Righteous, which is yours, and Rise of the Rune Lords 6 sessions in.
Let's hear about Wrath of the Rise of the Rune Lords. Because I'm curious as to where you're at in this, how you were digging it,
okay,
and whether or not you had to change it significantly.
Well, we're going to try and avoid spoilers as much as possible. So if I say that we're at part 4 of chapter 1, so of Burnt Offerings, we're at the third major map. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so far it's been going rather interestingly. I had a lot of hesitation about running an entire canned campaign just because I want to make sure I'm getting it right. I want to make sure I'm doing it by the book, and that anytime I'm adapting something, I know it's something that doesn't play into it later. So the first couple of sessions were a lot of pressure because you're meeting 5 or 6 NPCs that it specifically says you're going to get to know them over the entire campaign. These people will be coming back. And so it was really important to get a lot of details. Ameiko is a character in particular that has a lot of details about her that relate to the adventure and relate to other NPCs you're going to meet. And so anytime the players were interacting with Ameiko, I was just like, just a second, boom, face into a book, just to make sure I get things right. And I didn't quite get a couple of things right, but those are more her own personal motivation. So Maya Meiko is her motivation is slightly different from how it's been played out. And so later when something happens, she has a bit more of an active role rather than a passive role. I'm trying. Yeah, you know what? I'll let this one go out. So at some point, Meiko does get kidnapped, and the way it's described, she kind of gets overwhelmed. But my mistake was early on. I had her join the PCs on a small side quest that they'd kind of initiated themselves. They said they were going to go and capture a goblin because they didn't leave any alive for interrogation. So so actually one of the great resources has been the first 6 issues of the Pathfinder comic, because there's encounters in the back, and there's also stats for a lot of the NPCs that are in Rise of the Runelord. So I've been using those issues, the back matter and the comic issues, often. And so I used one of the encounters in the back of the comic, had Meiko go along with them, before realizing that at some point it says there's a reason that Meiko, who has class levels, doesn't go adventuring anymore. So my Meiko does. And then so later when she got kidnapped, and it basically says she kind of got overwhelmed and beaten by goblins, and it's like, really? Meiko is a multi-level character who now I have established can hold her own and go out on adventures with adventurers. So my Meiko instead fought them off and ran and hid because she was getting overwhelmed, but didn't just get knocked out and tossed into a room. So I'm making small changes like that as they happen organically, but otherwise I'm trying to stick to the source material as much as possible, which doesn't mean that if the PCs find a way around it, like the fourth map has kind of a part 1 and then a part 2 section, and then they were like, well, what if we approach part 2 directly? And I was just reading it over. It's like, well, there's absolutely nothing stopping you. In fact, in the part 1 section, there's even a watchtower that is specifically abandoned. It says that there is nobody in this watchtower, so you can get around the part 1 of this map, skip over 20 encounter locations, or 20 locations that all have descriptions and read aloud text and give some context for the adventure. Nope, they found a workaround, and so they've skipped right over that and are going right into the second part of the last major map.
They skipped the biggest boss in the whole freaking campaign, in my opinion, by doing that. The most dangerous, deadly boss that we've ever faced.
Well, there's definitely one encounter in there that logistically was going to be a little more difficult than I'm used to, and so I don't quite mind that they skipped over that. Like, I don't mind anything as long as the players have kind of control over the direction that things are going. Then I'm happy. And if they're rudderless, that's the only time I'll really step in. So at one point, they finished off a map, and an important NPC villain ran through an open door, and just outran them because he was a lot faster than them. And then the next session, the PCs were just kind of going to NPCs that they'd already spoken to and just kind of going in circles. And so I just basically had one of the NPCs say, like, oh, he ran off? Where did he go? And they're like, oh, yeah, all right, let's see if he actually ran somewhere. And that led them to the next map.
Yeah, no, I know. I didn't mean to say that you should put them back on the rails or go back to repeat some of the content they skipped. I'm actually really glad that they did that because it makes a lot of sense to do that. It's just an in joke with my players is that there's a particular piece of terrain in there that proved to be the bane of their existence, and okay, I'm just going to say it. The bridge, for no reason that they should have gotten caught up on that bridge, it became like 2 sessions worth of RP and trying to overcome this horrible bridge boss, to the point now that my players encounter a bridge in any PFS scenario, any Pathfinder scenario whatsoever, they immediately start like throwing all their buffs up and getting ready for like an epic encounter against the bridge boss.
My PCs saw that bridge, and they were like, "Oh, let's watch out for that bridge."
Oh, I mean, it's not a huge thing. It's not even supposed to be that big a thing in the adventure. It's just with my group, bridges. No, never bridges again.
Actually, I'm going to show a picture because this is one of the funny things that happens between words and art. Let's see. It is the Pathfinder Society Primer, I believe. The cover I'm talking about, Pathfinder Society. It is of one of the locations. No, not the Pathfinder. Oh, no, the Inner Sea Primer. There we go. So, there is a specific location that is described as an island that some people say resembles the face of a statue. Here is the only art that I found about that location. That doesn't just kind of resemble a statue. That is like full-on carved details. This isn't just something that people have seen, and some people are like, hey, do you see the face in the statue? No, that's clearly, at some point, somebody carved this thing out.
This is interesting. There's another piece of art of this exact same location, and the statue head is upright in that piece. And the fortress on that doesn't look anything like how the fortress is described if you read the thing. So, yeah, but even then, in the other piece of art, it's like, no, that's very clearly a statue head, not some way to describe it. This is, I mean, like, it's like the Eiffel Tower. I mean, I can see the face, I can see the eyes. It just winked at me. No, you're right.
But what's fun is that this is such an iconic adventure that the locations have art. So if I look hard enough, I will come across the art for that location, and I'll be able to show it to my players. And I've got the pawns, and I've gotten a couple of key miniatures. I've got Ameiko as a miniature, and I'm really happy because that brings her to life a little bit more than, say, the sheriff, who's just two-dimensional cardboard. And I love two-dimensional cardboard. The pawns are great, but for specific NPCs, I'm glad that I've got their plastic miniature.
For a second there, I was thinking you were saying the sheriff was a two-dimensional character, and I'm like, wait, no, they're all very threshed out. I mean, gosh, man, I love playing Mayor Kendra.
Oh, really? Mayor Kendra is, of the 3 NPCs that you meet at the the Swallowtail Festival, she's the one my PCs have interacted with the least.
Oh, okay. I imagine it's going to be very different. There's way too much for them to interact with all of it. There's like 30-some locations, ultra detailed in Sandpoint. There's like 3 different taverns they could have ended up using as their base of operations. There's multiple factions of NPCs, and my players like completely missed like half of it. Like the Scarny half that comes up later. Like they just like, Scarnies? Nah. Why would we want to deal with the Scarnettis? And then so that entire half of Sandpoint just got ignored, and I imagine other PCs that might become a much more major plot point if they chose to interact with them.
Actually, that's another funny thing. Like reading over, this is the first adventure path. This is the first part of the first adventure path. So when it introduces something like the Zarni that I've known for years through Pathfinder Society, and it's like, this is what the Zarni are all about. It's like, well, who doesn't know that? And it's just funny realizing how much stuff was established in this one book through like the occasional throwaway line.
Yeah, I have a hard time. Yeah, because I guess for me in Pathfinder, this was my intro. So like, this was like, oh, this is the Scarny, and then coming later and said they're going to do a faction about these guys. That's cool. And except for you, it's completely backwards. Man, I'm kind of jealous, but I guess I really enjoyed that part where like it was still a mystery. Galarian was still a mystery going through this our first time, and now it's very well established, and to the point that some of this stuff that's supposed to be big reveal surprise moments are going to be like, oh, well, of course. I mean, everybody knew that this god was about blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. But then, like, at the same time, like, when you find that, like, you start learning, like, the mother of monsters is heavily involved in it, and what it means to be the mother of monsters is, like, really freaking creepy at the time. And now it's like everybody knows what she does.
Well, it was also funny when the Licktoad Goblin tribe is referenced. And they're the heroes of Weeby Goblins 2, which my players have all played through. So suddenly when the Licktoads get brought up, it was just like 10 minutes of like subtle references to all of the Goblin PCs from that adventure. And when we played it, we had 5 PCs, so 2 people played Poog. And they were like, oh yeah, like, is there a goblin named Poog there? And Shalelu's like, I've heard of a goblin or 2 named Poog, yes.
Now, Shalelu, how are you leaning on her? Is she being used a lot, or is she just being completely sidelined?
No, no, she's actually been anytime they're completely out of ideas, because at this point in the adventure, the actual sheriff has gone to Magnamar for support, and Shalelu is the acting sheriff. And so she really knows her goblins, but she can't go out adventuring with them because she's got a post in the city right now. But she is the one that the PCs constantly are going to with, like, well, we found this weird thing. What do you know about it? Sometimes she's helpful, sometimes she's not, but she's one of their main sources of information. Which would be great if I could be consistent at all with how I voice her. I, for whatever reason, decided to give her like a Southern Belle type voice. I am not good at a Southern Belle. I can get maybe halfway through the sentence before she starts sounding like a baritone Canadian.
No. Well, that could also work for her.
Yeah.
No, like
No.
I've sketched out areas on this, and I'm like, no, this is the area where everybody talks like hillbillies, and this is the area where everybody talks like it's Georgia, and this is the area where everybody talks like it's Transylvania, and then you realize that everybody was complaining about an Asian influence in Pathfinder when Jade Regent was coming around. I'm like, no, there was Asian influence in Pathfinder in the first darn book. So one of the advantages you get when you're running Rest of the Rune Lords is every toy you can imagine is available to make this easier on you. So what toys have you adapted for this?
So I've got the pawns, I've got some of the miniatures, the face cards. I've been using face cards like mad. And what's cool is that I've been just kind of tabbing them to the back of the pawns. So basically it's a pawn and a face card sharing a base. And so if it's just the character talking, I put it out there and it's just the close-up of their face and their whole body. And it gives the players something to focus on, and it's a lot easier for them to remember which NPCs they're talking to. So yeah, face cards have been great. The comic, like I mentioned, was a surprisingly good resource. Having the sheriffs, Ameikos, and I believe the priests stats all laid out, it's just been super helpful, and I wasn't expecting to use the back matter of those comics at all. And I've been using Sirenscape, and Sirenscape worked really well in the original session that we ran, but then I ran into some of the problems that I described to Ben last episode, where just my setup is lousy. And so in the new year, I plan on hooking up speakers to the base of my battle table, my battle stand, and making sure that it's like a more of a surround sound effect, so that it's not just super loud to a couple of people and me as the GM, and then no resonance at all with the people across the table. What else have I been using? Yep,
you did mention face cards, and I didn't use face cards for Rise of the Rune Lords because they weren't out yet. And by the time they were out, we kind of knew all the gang. By that point, I was printing out like paper handouts to give out. But in Wrath of the Righteous, I'm using face cards like crazy, because even worse than Rise of the Rune Lords, they made a big deal in Wrath of the Righteous of doing a repeating cast, and the cast parties with them because it's a traveling adventure. So they put a retinue of, here are your support staff, and they keep getting more of them, and they keep going with you. So keeping track of them was difficult. So what I did do is I went down to Staples in my area, and these are like $1, and it's meant to like put little store signs in, but you can fit like 2 or 3 face cards in one of these if you're creative, and then just set it up on top of I set them up on top of the castle, but you can just set them up in front of the GM screen or at the front of your battle mat or stuff, and then like any NPCs that are involved in it, I just put them all in these. I picked up a couple of them because they're $1. And then if it's an NPC they're not familiar with, I like write a little tag and put their name on it. So, and the name are on the back of the face card, so both I and the PCs can see the name of everybody involved, and it's like always on display. And as soon as they're off the scene, I take them off and just put a new one up when the and I drop things.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly how I've been playing it, so that looks like a really handy resource. I think I might pick those up as well. We don't have Staples. We have the French equivalent called Bureau en gros, which means, I guess it means office stock.
Okay, I was like really wondering if the word staple in French was that long, but
No, staple in French is like a fish or something like that.
oh,
The
well,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to transition off of it.
Then give me 1 second then, because the NPC that I think the players are going to take the most from the Rise of Ruin Lords is the curator of the Winged Serpent Magic Shop, who has no personality whatsoever, according to the book. He's just, if they happen to go to a magic shop, here's his name, and he's a Wizard 2, Rogue 2. And that's all I had to go with it. So I just made him this really flighty acrobat wizard who was just you walk into the shop and you just kind of have to navigate this narrow corridor of just books and curiosities and the occasional like magic spear sticking out, and it was just like, and he could just glide through it because he'd memorized the entire thing, and he was practically doing park, just horde of magic items that he'd left out in just an insane pile. Anytime they asked for something, he would like open up a bird cage, put his hand through, and boom, there's that magic scroll they were just talking about or whatever. And we the scene may have lasted an hour of a session of just talking to this NPC and just being fascinated with what he would do next. And it was great because feeling like so much pressure to stay on story, this was the most I'd managed to improv for the entire campaign, and it was a lot of fun just having a shift in my own energy as the GM to just be able to come up with things on the fly and know that there is nothing important about this character, so anything I establish about him is fine, and it will just stay within our campaign and never screw up a later book in the series.
He sounds neat, and I must steal him for use as an NPC in the other adventures because that's cool. No, and that's what I really like about this. Is like I said, they detail out to various degrees, like 50 so possible NPCs, and any one of them are going to be the ones that your PCs get attached to. I like that you got to flesh this one out. My PC's got the other rogue wizard. There are two rogue wizards in that town. The one that runs the orphanage.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he is another rogue wizard.
Yeah, they got introduced to him real early through some side stuff involving some creepy dolls in the back of that expansion, in the back of the book. And like there was a whole side adventure there, and then they just like he's supposed to be this like resource they can go to learn about things, and later on he actually gets some parts in the adventure he's supposed to help them out with, and they just were like right away they were just like creepy wizard who runs the orphanage and is unnaturally obsessive about this Thalassian stuff. We trust him not 1 inch, and so I have this one NPC who's very genuinely like, I'm here to help. I know all kinds of stuff about this. Why don't you help me let you learn about this stuff? And they're like, nope, evil, back! Throw garlic at it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with the sheriff who, for the first session or two, I was just having him very measured and like really just kind of feeling the PCs out. So sometimes something would be happening like during the goblin fight, and they would look over and the sheriff was kind of fighting the goblins, but he was mostly leaving the hard ones to the PCs. And so they were starting to get super suspicious of him, and then finally he's like, I trust you with something, and he gives them the full, like their full responsibility, their new position in the town. He basically deputizes them, and they're like, but wait a second, but we didn't, I suddenly think we can trust this guy, because he seems really sincere, even though he was super suspicious up until this point. Which is good, because my players are always super suspicious of NPCs for absolutely no reason.
I know, it's horrible. It's because I think it's because the suspicious of NPCs for no reason. It's because there's no GM comes as a fully developed GM hatched from an egg, knowing the great rules of Ernst and Gygax and how to properly educate. We've all made mistakes, and we've all made the same mistakes growing up, and I think part of that is the process of learning to roleplay and being introduced to roleplay is eventually you get the GM that there's a reason you don't trust any of his NPCs ever, or maybe you've just played too much Ravenloft, which that's a general bad idea as well. To the point that, yeah, my PCs distrust everybody unless I make it explicitly clear that you should trust these guys. I'm not going to screw you. No, I triple promise I'm not going to screw you. No, I'm triple, double doggy promise with a cherry on top, both hands tied behind my back. I'm not going to have them stab you in the back in your sleep and take all your stuff. And then they still handcuff him to the tent post.
Well, in my player's defense, there is an NPC that they've taken quite a liking to that will backstab them in a future book that I know about. And so
yeah, but he doesn't intend to do that yet.
No, it's true. It's just funny knowing that this is coming. Like, every time they've interacted with this NPC and left with just a positive feeling about him, it's like, oh, guys.
It's so much fun. You have read ahead, right? You've read that book and gotten ready that you've been laying the hints down for that.
I usually am reading for the session that I'm running next, the day before or on the bus ride home before the session. So I run Monday nights, and I'm usually reading Sunday night or Monday late into the afternoon. And then in situations like the last session where everything I planned was that entire section they skipped over with the cleverness, I was basically running blind for the first part of that session. Venka Thalma wants to know if says that she used Broderick Quink a lot. How about me? I actually had to look him up on the Pathfinder wiki because my characters have not interacted with him at all. It says he's a resident sage of Sandpoint. He is at the Curious Goblin. No, they have yet to go there, but I've actually kind of skipped over a lot of going, just the general exploring of Sandpoint, just because that is the hardest thing for me to do. It requires so much just learning facts, and I'm not good at learning facts. I'm good at remembering characters and portraying characters, but if something's actually concrete information, I am trying to avoid it as much as possible, especially if it's not relevant to the plot.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I would have done Sandpoint more justice because it's such a really well-developed town, and in like book 3 and 4 especially, you get a lot of opportunity to take advantage of the familiarity they've had with the town. But yeah, it's so hard, especially coming into it if you don't know right away that, hey, it gives you 2 weeks here between the start of things and when the action starts just to get to know the town. You really should be taking advantage of that and doing side quests and sort of helping them understand the town. Now, Brother Quink was a personal favorite of mine of these, and I played him not at all like he's written in the books. He was like this super hyper... I played him as this like really super hyper alchemist sage that was obviously way too addled by the various chemicals he was using to uncover things. And so the PCs trusted this one because he was way too crazy to not trust, but at the same time it was like, we're going to keep Brother in this nice little padded cell and keep him nice and safe, but we need to come back to him because he knows so much about all this weird Thalassian stuff, but at the same time don't hand him any of the sharp objects. Now my campaign has been going relatively well. We're closing up on the second book of Wrath of the Righteous is about to wrap up. They're at the big moment of being big heroes, and a lot of the epic stuff is happening right now because they're at the part early on that they teased about where you have the army. And so they're now using... Yeah, now using the army. They're now using the army, and big, huge battles are happening, and like nice epic scale of things as they assault things. And it's been fun. It's been nice to get to this end point here. They've got I'm thinking 4 sessions left, if my guesses are right, to finish up this one. Just like the big work is about to get done, but then there's like a dungeon crawl they have to get through. So getting through the dungeon crawl will take them a few more sessions. But it's about to close out this book and then get to the next part. And overall, really loving Breath of the Righteous, but the systems, the layered systems, has finally been too much. And I have gone at Wrath of the Righteous with a red pen now, and I've started cutting subsystems out of the adventure path.
Wow.
To just make it easier to handle. The mass combat was the first thing to go. Even though it's really cool, they have armies, and like we're doing this army thing, and that's kind of nice. And but it was a situation where it slowed things down. It was really abstracted, and it felt like only one of the PCs really got to do anything for several sessions in a row. The guy who was built, like the one of the PCs is like took the leader archetype and like the leader mythic path and like all that stuff. And like really, I feel sorry for them. They built their character to be, I am a leader of men, and okay, here's the army segment for this next 5 sessions. You now have an army, and like, well, of course, like give all the army roles to the person who took all the army feats. But at the same time, we ended up having like characters just sort of sit there and just do nothing for sessions on end, because these mass combats really rolled down to one, like they could all make decisions, but at the end of the day it was one person making the rolls. The rolls weren't really all that complicated. It took up a lot of time. It was very abstracted. They felt that their characters didn't have a direct impact on the fights themselves, because you don't, not all that much. And so eventually we talked about it and we cut it. So now instead of every time there's an army encounter, I instead just set up a nice large-scale actual encounter and throw them on the field against whatever general the other side has, plus some mooks, and then let them fight it out directly instead of through the army. I did feel bad about that, because we had the one character who really built to do this. But it was one of those situations where the least painful thing to do was to take that out. And then I, of course, immediately said, "Hey, man, you have full free reign, no penalty to rebuild those options you chose to do the mass combat stuff, because we're cutting it. So feel free to trade those feats out, do any stat changes you want, and I'm not going to hold anything against you." And he did. He swapped out his skills and stuff, and he took some different feats to more focus on his cohort. Now is the big focus of his leadership stuff. So he still is the party leader. He still makes the diplomacy rolls and the tactical decisions, and is a really cool character. The Mythic Path is really awesome, because one of the things that he has done that's just awesome is one of the first things he can do is, as a swift action, he can say, "Everybody take a free movement right now," which becomes crazy awesome and powerful at the first round of combat. He wins initiative and then goes, "Okay, now everybody get in position and screw over the enemies." And so you immediately begin combat before even the first round of combat, and like the rogues are already flanking and things like that have been set up.
NPCs to have that power.
Well, you can do it to the NPCs.
Yeah.
And he's also got a cohort now. He's focusing on his cohort with his feats, and that's working out well. But I had to cut it, and I'm going to continue to cut extra systems out of this book, because it's just bogging things down. And as much as I like having the entirety of Pathfinder being used at once, the entirety of Pathfinder is a bit much to use at once. So next on the chopping block is going to be any sort of kingdom building that they have to do. That's just going to get cut right out and just simplified to the options. Any sort of, anything that isn't just traditional adventuring at this point is going to get cut right out unless it's not obtrusive, because just keeping track of the characters themselves, this crazy huge amount of NPCs that are going, they've got a dozen named people in their staff, in their support staff for their army. that are important, and like they keep picking them up because my PCs are like, they don't believe, like they're playing the lawful good with a capital G on this one. So like every chance they get to rescue somebody, or every chance they get to, no, 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 it was a really unfortunate circumstance, let's reform you, let's go through the redemption rules on this one, and they're saving everybody. And so I've got like, I have these three things, and like by the time, like during the council meetings when they actually have like the whole war council together, I've got like having to stick them in at the top edges and like sideways, and like all of them across the thing is like, and here is the entire war council. We're going to this is now going to be the next 45 minutes of roleplay is basically going to be episodes 5 through 6 of Battlestar Galactica as we talk about what we're doing, and it's fun. But I have so much dedicated to roleplay. Then the mythic stuff on top of that is like new, different, and just getting our minds around mythic characters. And then, of course, every third boss comes down and it's mythic, just because they have to fight some mythic stuff if they're mythic people. And so I just had to cut it and sort of pare it down to its core elements. And it's still very fun. The storyline's great, but I'm also running into another issue where the PCs are really strong, like crazy strong compared to what they're fighting. So they're kind of rolling over everything too. So we set up all these extra rules we have to learn, and then it doesn't matter because they just roll over the bad guys, and then that's it. Like all the army stuff, by the time like a mythic leader is leading that army, it's like the enemies would have had to roll a 20, and they would have had to roll 2 1s in order to take damage. So it didn't matter that we were following the rules for the mass combat anyway. There was no way they could lose.
Well, it sounds like you're hacking it up the right way. Like you gave the player that was committed to this, you gave him an out, and he's satisfied with that?
He did not like the decision, but he realized that, him having fun versus 7 people not having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that I had to do it. Like I felt like a real heel doing that one.
Was play-by-post for the army sections, for the mass combat sections, was that an option? How would that have played out? No?
No, it's a core part of the adventure. Like it happens constantly and variably. Like this section here might be an actual encounter. Here's a dungeon crawl. Oh, here's a mass combat. And then, well, we go left. Well, that means a mass combat. And like part of it is you have to siege a city, and so that's all mass combat.
I mean, it sounds awesome, and it sounds epic, which is exactly what a mythic campaign is supposed to be. But yeah, it also sounds math.
Yeah, and it's like, and I don't really like the mass combat rules that Pathfinder has by default. I really wish there were better rules for it, because it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it belongs in the game. It doesn't play like any other part of the game. Have you've done the mass combats, right?
No, I haven't got to that part of Kingmaker yet, and I know there's a mass combat Pathfinder Society scenario in Season 5 that I have recruited to that army, but I haven't actually played that scenario yet.
Well, there's like the part, I printed off the section of Ultimate Campaign for mass combat because I handed it out to the players. It's 20 pages. And it's, I mean, I hate to be critical about something like this, but this is an area that it just didn't mesh. It uses profession soldier is the main stat for your leader, and who has that unless they built this? So like that's one of the things. My player took profession soldier. Like where else are you going to use that?
The base attack bonus, since that represents how good you are at fighting.
Yeah, no, it's profession soldier, because it's not even about how good you are. It's about how much you know about rank and file and tactics. And so, and like it has this weird offense-defense role. Like it's an opposed roll every round, not a roll against static numbers. And like you can be aggressive or degressive, and then there's all these extra stats and tactics you can add on top of that. And it uses a different XP system for how your army learns things and becomes developed. And it just doesn't mesh, in my opinion. I really don't like the way the mass combat defaults in Pathfinder works, and I have considered there are alternative third-party options for handling mass combats, but that I was looking at that might be a great way to swap that out with these, but yeah, at the end of the day, it was just easier and less painful to just excise it and replace them with boss fights.
I have read over a couple of different versions of third-party mass combat because when I found out that the Pathfinder mass combat was not going to make you feel like your character is in the that it was going to be a top-down view of an army rather than your character's point of view from within the army and seeing the other army advancing, that didn't appeal to me. I always wanted to feel like if we're doing mass combat, the most important part of the combat, most important part of the army are the PCs. And yes, they are affecting major parts of major chunks of the army, but it's still about the PCs. And when I was flat out told that's not how it's going to be in Pathfinder, I started looking at alternatives, and none of the alternatives really worked for me either. It almost feels like I need to make a board game that could be used in replacement for mass combat rules.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do this right, or to do this, I won't say right or wrong, but to do this more to our liking. Yeah, I mean, we want to see, the starting fight to Lord of the Rings or the climactic battle scenes of Braveheart. We don't want to see, the way it handles it's almost like the PCs are sitting in a tent up on top of the hill watching the fight. They're not actually doing anything in it. Which it might actually be what is happening, because that would be about how the battles would have been handled.
But not if your general is Hercules. Then you want Hercules at the front of the army being Hercules.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. I'm sure there's a way to handle it, a way to do it. Maybe to make it where the armies are special attacks your characters get during the actual fight.
Sure.
And then I have archers attack and then things like that happen. And the Dragon Age Origins, there was a part where you're sieging a city in that video game, and that's how it handled it. You actually are controlling your party, but you've earned this army, so there's a little wheel, and you go, archers, go! And then you see a whole bunch of archers come on the field and start helping fight the enemy units and stuff like that. But then that runs the problem where we're trading out the abstraction of mass combat with now we're throwing down 30 people on our battle mat. And Pathfinder does not like having 30 people on its battle mat.
All right, you ready to move on to some reviews?
Let's do the reviews.
Excellent. We'll be right back with reviews right after this. So we are going a little late, but we cut last week early, and it is the last one of the year, so I'm willing to go a little longer on this one.
Okay.
Cool. Otherwise, you ready?
Yes.
I got one here. I did not look up the names like I said I would, though.
Well, they're printed on them.
On all of them.
They're printed on them right here.
Some of the older ones, I don't think so.
Oh, that is right. Well, I didn't pick any of the older ones because I like a lot of the older ones, but they're out of print. So
fair enough. All right. 3, 2, 1. In the review segment, we talk about stuff. We've read it, we liked it, we want you to know about it. Or sometimes, if we didn't like it, we want you to know why. That's how reviews work. And, yeah, it's reviews. First one, Pathfinder Tales. We are big fans of Pathfinder Tales. This is something that we were looking forward to for years, and I feel like the whole line has really been paying off. It wasn't exactly what we were expecting, but as it continues to grow, and now that we know what to expect from the books, we continue to be surprised by different ways that the Golarion is portrayed, explored, and I know that most of the way that I've learned about Golarion has been through Pathfinder Tales. The most recent one that I read was Reign of Stars. It was mentioned earlier. It is the Iron God / Numeria tie-in, and it's by Tim Pratt, who wrote Liar's Blade, which Param and I both rank as one of our favorite, if not our favorite, Pathfinder Tales novel, just because it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's super funny. It's great characters. The plot really develops well. Reign of Stars has a lot in common with Liar's Blade. It's none of the same characters, it's none of the same setting, but it's really funny. And the characters are, for the most part, really well developed. Not quite as well developed as Liar's Blade. And I'm probably going to say that 4 or 5 times in this review. Just not quite as good as Liar's Blade. But the first chapter of this book is amazing. We've talked about how Pathfinder Tales tend to be populated more by anti-heroes.
Mm-hmm.
This one flat out starts feeling like the main character is a supervillain. He is an alchemist, he's in his lab, and he just kind of hears something in his yard. And he's like, oh, adventurers are coming. Somebody's probably coming to break into my lab. Well, luckily, they'll see that there's pit traps everywhere, and they'll turn back. And if they don't turn back, well, they'll try and sneak around the pit traps, and that's where the well-hidden catapults are, and they will just be launched over the wall. But assuming they get past the catapult, then they'll get to the front door, and they'll be covered by acid. But assuming somehow they were nimble enough to get around the catapults, but tough enough or wearing heavy enough armor to get through the acid, and he's just like going into all the traps that he's got set up to keep people away from him while he's just in his, basically, the boss room, the boss chamber. And then when it does turn out that, yes, somebody was coming in and they managed to get through everything, he's just looking at them fascinated for a second, then he's like, you're incorporeal. And it's just amazing. It's amazing watching this guy's psychology unravel as he's just talking about how the lengths he's gone to keep people away from him. But this person delivers a message, and we find out that he's got a connection to his past when he was in Numeria, and he's got to go out there and fulfill this quest. And along the way, he teams up with his old buddy, Skiver, I believe his name is, Skiver, a street-savvy rogue named Skiver, and they have an amazing relationship because Skiver is really the only person that, our main character is Alarion. Aileron? Aileron. A-L-A-E-R-O-N. A-E is pronounced like A, so Aileron. All right, Aileron. Aileron the Alchemist is so xenophobic, so just wants to be in a lab toiling away. His only friend is chemical reactions. But there's this one guy, Skiver, who just kind of gets him, and they get each other, and they're both terrible people who are completely willing to be selfish and borderline evil, but not to each other. There's just this loyalty between the two of them, between this rogue and this alchemist. So that's a really strong relationship, and it feels different from the relationship in Liar's Blade. And that's one I'm not going to say is slightly not quite as good as Liar's Blade. This is a really fascinating friendship and relationship. Where it didn't work as well as Liar's Blade is how the plot unfolds. Because Liar's Blade, it felt like every step of the way, everything mattered. Everything was a clue to what everyone's actual motivation was. Whereas in this one, there's a good chunk of it that just felt like stuff happening. And that's often a complaint I have for novels. If it doesn't really tie into anything, if it doesn't give forward momentum to the action, then it's just stuff happening. So at one point they're on a boat, and then they're getting boarded by other pirates. And Skiver happens to know one of the pirates, so then they negotiate it, and so they just let the first boat they were on get pirated, and they get on the other boat and they move on. And it's kind of fun, and at first I was like, oh, is this new pirate captain joining the party? But it was just another scene reminding you that these are bad dudes, and then we got to the other end, whereas if one chapter ended with, now we're getting on a boat, and the other chapter began with, now we're getting off a boat, it wouldn't have affected the story. It would have just taken a good 40 pages out of this book, which it kind of needed because I don't even think they get to Numeria until about page 150 or 200. And this is not a very big book. This is less than 400 pages. And it's got a robot on the front. Like, it's telling you this is the robot fantasy book. And you don't really get robots until much later into the book. And when you get into Numeria, you meet the Technic League, and the Technic League is a major part of Numeria. It's true, but they're humans, they're humanoids, they're just the common races, and they have slaves, and we kind of question, like, there's a lot of good questions about slavery and its place in a society, and even these evil characters are questioning, well, how appropriate is it to use another person as for someone's stature to be that low. But again, it's so late into the book that by the time we get to the robots, there's barely any book left, and that was kind of what I was looking forward to the most. But it didn't feel like they were deliberately dangling robots in front of us and then taking it back and making us wait. It just felt like they were making us wait. We get to the robots, we get to the Silver Mount, we get a lot of things that are in Numeria. It just feels like the order we got them wasn't great. But ultimately, I still really liked the characters, and that's the best thing about the Tim Pratt novels, is that he really knows how to make a character fit into Galarian, completely different from any of the other Pathfinder Tales characters, but still really fun, really interesting, really engaging. And I would still recommend Reign of Stars. Not quite as much as I would recommend Liar's Blade, but another good novel from Tim Pratt.
Now, Avinka Thalma asks, have you read City of Fallen Sky? Those characters met there.
Oh, these two characters?
Yeah, these are the main characters from the City of Fallen Sky. I haven't read City of Fallen Sky, I'm afraid, either.
Okay, I know that Tim Pratt had 3 novels. I even own City of the Fallen Sky. But for whatever reason, as much as I really liked the first novel of his that I read, and I still enjoyed this one, I still haven't picked that one up. I think I just got it too late in the game, and just with our review schedule always trying to get the newer novels in,
right.
I haven't gone back to that one. But at this point, now that I know that there's even a connection to this, I'm curious to see how it plays out.
Now, it sounds like a great book, exactly the kind of book I want. You talked earlier about this isn't how we expected the novels to go. I expected, and you're right, I expected the novels to be like other fantasy series have gotten, like where they're these serious epic trilogies. We get a main cast, and that main cast becomes the cast that represents the game. You get your Elminsters, you get your Rasslins, you get the idea. You get that kind of thing, and I don't want that no more. I don't. I like what they've done with what we've got. This, where each book is a genre in itself, and we have some repeating characters, but like each author basically has their own complete style, and it's not, and it sort of shows off the kitchen sink that is Galarian. It's the fact that no, this is your buddy cops, this is your murder mystery, this is your heist, this is your Sherlock Holmes, this is your really weird Wu Zhao Hong Kong movies. This is not your fantasy novels. This is the pulp comic books you used to read when you were 10 back in 1960. That's what this is. These are you can tell the pulp roots of the company and how they've shown it off in what novels they allow to be written, where everything is just completely different than it was before. And I love them for it. I would not want the epic fantasy quintets anymore. I want more evil alchemists teaming up with his buddy to figure out how to keep ghosts out of his house.
And one of the great strengths of the Tim Pratt books that we don't get in all of the Pathfinder Tales is how the main characters act like PCs. Not like they're the main guys on the quest, but they're really looking at things, and they analyze the situations they're in, similar to how players analyze them. And he's not afraid to write something that is so clearly the rules of the game. Like when Aleron uses his mutagen, it really just, it feels like it's only there because alchemists get mutagen. And so he just threw that in just to be like, and this happens, because cool, right? This guy can turn into a giant mindless creature every now and then. It's not a major part of his character. It's just like, this is a situation that calls for a giant monster.
So, buy, not buy?
Yeah, I'm going to say buy, and especially now knowing that City of the Fallen Sky, this is a continuation of a series, I'll read that and I'll see just how much more fleshed out these characters are after that. But then again, that wasn't lacking. Even it felt like, had you never read that, as this is your first introduction to these characters, as it was mine, there was no need to introduce them any further. It was a little in media res. We really got into Aileron's head. I think I've pronounced it every single time. I've pronounced it a little differently. And we really got that he and Skiver have a relationship. We didn't need to know why or where this whole thing started. So yes, recommend.
Now, one of the things that I pointed out when we were putting the review section together is that we talk about a lot of the different Pathfinder lines, and we talk about the cards, we review them. One of the things that Pathfinder does a lot of, and Paizo does a lot of, that we just barely talk about, are the flip maps. And they're a great resource for the game, and they're not expensive, and they're kind of cool, and we just sort of never talk about them. So we thought that for this review segment, we would talk about a few of our favorite flip maps and about the line in general. So, Ryan, what are some of your favorite flip maps and why?
All right, I'm going to start with the pub crawl.
Oh, you picked one I picked.
Oh, cool. Well, I'll tell you what I like about the pub crawl, and then you can say what you like about it.
Okay.
A lot of the maps work as both flip maps and as more like the map packs. So this is a complete chunk of the city. I'm just realizing a challenge of the reviews. But yeah, if you want, it looks like it could be a really overpopulated city that has narrow streets and a lot of buildings. Or if you want to just fold it down into different ways, suddenly you've got a small tavern, and you've got a tavern on the side of a cliff that's maybe an abandoned building. And so just following the fold lines in there, you get different buildings. And then, and this may be sacrilegious to you, Param, because I know how you feel about things staying mint, but if you fold them along the building lines rather than along the folds of the map, then you can create more different buildings that will... Yes, well, Param, I'm sorry, but sometimes you just got to do it for your game. You can create more unique buildings that, yes, okay, they're all kind of going to look alike, but they're taverns, so they're all pretty much going to have the same wooden floor, the same number of tables and whatnot, and it's just so that every city you go to can have a recognizable tavern building that's not just the same tavern over and over again.
I mean, I really like it, and I'd like it to use it as like the various taverns, but I more or less actually go to this one when I want to do various rural scenes, because when they were first, a lot of the problems with a lot of city maps, including some of the early flip maps, is that the city is like a grid, and like there's these nice, neat little houses that are all very similar and all in a row and of all of 3 different shapes. And it doesn't look very dynamic, but if you were just using this as a city street section, it looks very dynamic, and then also having the interiors so that we know what's in there when they bust through the door or throw somebody through the window, and that matters. And it doesn't take much talking to say that, no, that isn't a tavern, that's a tailor shop or something else. See the counter there? And it doesn't take much to convert from a bird's eye view on that. But no, and in fact, that's going to be a theme on a lot of the flip maps I picked out, is that they're really interesting urban environments. I know I picked out another one for that same reason. One to talk about urban maps that I really love and use again and again. One of my favorites is the Flip Map Warehouse. This is one of the warehouse sections, and it's got another 2 warehouses in the back. And that's because eventually, if you're doing any urban adventuring, eventually some form of warehouse and or abandoned building or big complex you need. And having this with all the boxes and hundreds of crates and barrels just scattered around on it, it's just really great. And it makes, a natural, like, dungeon-like thing that they can move in. But then again, I also like it when I break the rules of that. And like in a recent encounter with a Vrock, where they had to fight a Vrock inside a warehouse in Maratha-Ratcha's game, it was like, they can fly, and boxes don't get in the way of things that can fly or things that have climb speeds and like to charge across them. So like they have the PCs treating it like a dungeon until they realize, nope, 3-dimensional. It's just interesting, and because drawing out warehouses is really fiddly because you have to draw thousands of little boxes, having a map that has like all that done really nicely illustrated for you and believably illustrated for you is a huge time saver. So this is one of my favorite flip maps, and it's a double-sided one, so that's helpful. Some flip maps have just a texture on one side, but this one actually has a map on both sides.
I've played multiple Pathfinder Society scenarios that use the large warehouse, And what I like about it is that there's no like obvious this is where the fighting should be happening. So you can reuse that map several times, and it will play out differently depending on where you put the big bad. And like you were saying with the Vrock, if you put a rogue in there, or if you put a halfling in there, someone that can sneak around or use the fact that these boxes will have little gaps so that they can just keep going around to places that the medium-sized PC and heavy armor can't. It's a surprising number of different ways you can run scenarios in that one location. The next one I wanted to talk about is similar to what you were just saying about textured on one side and texture on one side and a specific map location on the other. Forgot to bring it upstairs, but it's the map that comes with the beginner box, which is one side is completely generic, and the other side has a lot of really interesting dungeon rooms, and you can run it exactly to run through the adventure that comes in the beginner box. But if you're just running your own home campaign and you just need a cave or whatever, or you just need a couple of cool rooms, you can fold that up to use just those rooms, run different encounters. There's a lot of just generic rectangular rooms and hallways and whatnot that you can use to great effect for a lot of different dungeon locations. And then in a pinch, you can just flip it over, and it's nice that it's a completely generic map on the other side. That's actually what I was thinking was one of the advantages of that one, that it could be absolutely anything on one side. On the other side, it's built as a very specific dungeon that can also be a great many generic dungeons.
Now, on a note like that, I didn't think about this till you just mentioned it. Another great flip map product is the basic terrain pack. Now, this is a double-sided pack. It costs twice as much, but you get twice as map. And I love that one because I use a lot of 3D terrain in my games. And when you're playing Pathfinder, you have two options when you use 3D terrain. Either get a grid for the 3D terrain to use, or you convert everything to inches and pull out the tape measures, and you're playing Pathfinder Warhammer, which actually doesn't take as much extra time as you think. The biggest issue there is you better make some templates for the different spell sizes in advance when you do that, so that you're not arguing about spell sizes when you're using tape measure. But otherwise, the game actually runs just about as fast, except for now you have an extra thing on the table you've got to use. But I like keeping the grid system, so I love the basic terrain packs because originally to get those basic terrains you had to remember that, the original tavern map had a really cool forest texture on the back, and the canyon ambush pack, its backside was a desert, so I had to memorize like which map had the cool texture on the back. But now they've got the basic texture pack, so it's just a grid with like this one has grass, this one has desert, this one has stone, this one has brick, and so I put that down, and then I put my 3D terrain on top of that map, and so it's so my PCs have a grid to use, and then also the cool 3D stuff.
Cool.
Any more maps on your end?
Yep, this is the first map pack, flip map rather, I ever had. It is the Forest. It's an older map. It might not be in circulation anymore, but it is exactly what I like from a map. On one side, it's fairly generic. It's mostly just a wood texture, and if you really just need some forest, it is exactly what you're looking for. And then the other, and it's got the road going through the middle. The other side, every single quadrant of it has an interesting feature. And so if you just need a tree stump, you fold it up, and you've got the tree stump location there. You can, you've got the stones, you've got a little bit of lake. It's a forest, and you've got to think of one side as just a forest location, the other side as forest components. And so as you're using the forest on one side, you say, okay, clear the map. You flip it over. You tell them which section to focus on. It's like, here's the interesting forest feature you've just come across. You run out there. You flip back over to the main forest path. And the main forest path can be used for a lot of different things as well. But it's the combination of generic and specific that I think makes the forest pack really cool.
I like the forest a lot, actually, for the same reasons you did it. One of my favorites, on the similar line, one of my favorite wilderness encounter map is the battlefield map. and mostly I just use this side of it. It's got two sides. It's got like a desert ambush section, which, kind of think of it, I could have really used that last Wrath of the Righteous campaign day, but I forgot I had it. Uh, and then this section, because it's a really cool bridge with a river and two sides and a hill. It makes it great. Like, how many encounters do you have that could fit this location? I have to make sure I keep track of when I used it last so that I don't overuse it, because it's really convenient. It's really believable. And then, like, as you can see on this one, I sketched out some tents because they camped here once in a Pathfinder Society game that they played on. But just having a bridge and the river and the hills, it has a lot of tactical elements and a lot of cover. So this map is really useful for when I have wilderness encounters, because it's pretty fair and it provides lots of interesting things to do. That's not just here's the map and here's a tree and then just have a battle and the archer wins because the archer wins anytime that happens. It's a great map. I like it a lot.
I'm going to get a little repetitive. Deep Forest is the last map that I'm going to recommend.
Same.
You too?
Yeah, that was my next one.
For pretty much the same reasons as I like the Forest, but this one's a little bit more detailed. So the Forest one's great because one side really is just plain forest. This one is like having two more sides of what I liked about the backside of the forest. It's just so many details. So you've got the Druid Grove, or whatever's going on in this circle of rocks. You've got the waterfall. You've got the tree stumps. There's so many just elements that, when combined with the generic forest, makes it a really interesting forest. And you can have an entire adventure in a woodsy location with plenty of just trips through the forest, constantly looking for whatever, and you can have a large variety of encounters. Like set-piece encounters, not just a fight is happening here, but a fight is happening here, and these are specific elements you should be paying attention to.
Right. It's great because you've got the fallen over trees, and then and it's not just. And the forest has like the tree trunk outline, but not like the foliage, so that you can see that, oh, it's not difficult terrain here. It's just a big freaking tree trunk in the way. Whereas a lot of forest maps just cover it with like the like if you were looking at it from Google Maps, and then everybody assumes it's difficult terrain as soon as you hit tree line. No, I love it. Deep Forest, great.
Do you have any more maps, Perm?
One last one. Actually, it's two, but I'm cheating here. One of my favorite maps ever is Waterside Tavern. This is kind of an older map, but it's been used a lot in Pathfinder Society. It makes a great base for bad guys in a city to use. Like, I use this as like the base that any Thieves Guild uses or anything like that, because you've got the water, you've got the docks. It's really nicely detailed. You've got a place in the middle you can throw people in the water. Lots of ways around it, and it's just been one of my favorite maps, and one of my favorite like really seedy taverns to use when I need like that, or a sea tavern or things like that. If I need any sort of dockside encounters, it's a great place to go. But like I said, it's one of the older ones, so it's been out of print for a little while now. And it's also one of the few maps they have ever reprinted.
Huh.
If in a package called CD Taverns, I haven't even opened this one yet. I bought it because it was the reprint. It has the entire Waterside Tavern done, though on this one it looks like it's a lighter texture color than the original one. It's like a much lighter version of the texture, and they've somehow saved space enough on this one that I don't know how, because I counted the squares and it maps square to square to the other one. So there's some wicked weird piezo magic going on here, but it also includes 3 other locations, including underneath the tavern, how it connects to the sewers and how that works, another tavern on the back here, and then a whole pub crawl middle of the city dingy area as well. So it's got 3 massive encounter areas in one map. Then this can easily be divided into dozens of encounter areas in one map. and all in one little package that includes one of my favorite maps they've ever done. On the back side of the original, you can see here it's just sort of a watery brick texture, blank texture on this side, which is useful for a brick texture because this is a texture that they didn't put in the terrain pack. But here it's map, 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 more map.
You did remind me of one thing about the deep forest map that I prefer over the forest map. The forest map is really dark, and I've never really found a color of marker that's good on it. You can use black, but even black kind of fades into the background because there's already a lot of lines on this map. Like, they really went dense with the forest, and so just drawing something that's going on in between the trees is really hard to see, no matter what color you're doing. Whereas the deep forest map, it feels like they really lightened up the forest color, so it doesn't match up entirely, but I'm okay with that because it means that I can modify it with dry erase or wet erase markers in a way that shows through a lot easier.
Yes, agreed. A lot of those earlier products were very dark, and the Steel Squire was making them, not Pathfinder or Paizo directly, and then eventually they just bought it out, or I'm not sure the business, how that went, but Steel Squire went away and became Game Mastery. Well, Game Mastery existed at the time, so something happened where those two things became one, and now it's just Pathfinder. But it does mean that the prints have been lighter, on a lot of the maps. Deep Forest, they actually made several forest maps back when they did the original forest map, and they all had the same pattern texture, so it was kind of a big deal when Deep Forest was released. They were using a different tile set for the forest that didn't match up with it, and that's one thing with these maps that we don't mention, is a lot of these maps are meant to go together, and not just, we focus on the flip maps this time, but like for the Dockside Tavern, there's actually also a map pack with those little card maps that they make called the Dock that matches it, so you can actually lay out different dock buildings next to the Dockside Tavern, and you have a whole city dock section. Which is cool, and the forest had several forest stuff and like tiles you could lay on the forest to add encounter areas to your deep forest to vary it up. And that's things they continue to do, but the old stuff doesn't match up with the new stuff.
This was a good idea, Param. I'm glad we did this. It's fun to geek out about some part of Pathfinder that, for all the years we've been doing this podcast, we don't really touch on enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, originally it wasn't even called Pathfinder Maps.
Yeah, Game Mastery.
Good. We got a comment.
Sorry, go ahead.
We got a comment from Bastille Longborough. He says, "Maps are nice, but I just bought a bunch of crafting products to make my own terrain. Hopefully, I'll get to make some things soon." Making your own terrain is awesome, Bastille, which is why I also mentioned the other use for the maps is to aid in your terrain, to give that base grid. If you get like the basic terrain packs or the basic flip maps, which can really help because you don't want to draw that grid yourself. I've done that, and it's time consuming. But making your own 3D terrain is awesome. Besides the Fat Dragon stuff that I keep mentioning again and again because I really love their products, I don't even work for them anymore. Oh yes, fair question. I used to work for them, but I don't anymore. But they do good stuff. There's a few other companies that also do good stuff. But if you go to another YouTube channel called The Crafty DM, he does a lot of do-it-yourself basic crafting terrain using cardboard and various craft materials that looks really great. I would really recommend checking out his channel. We'll add it to the show notes. I don't have it handy because I didn't know I was going to mention it. But he does a great series of podcasts. He puts out like a couple of shows a week about how he can make, like, just taking stuff like cardboard and some spray paint and some glitter and making like caverns that look convincing, or putting together your own black carriage for a vampire count to ride around in using just popsicle sticks and this box of cereal, and it looks convincing. It's a great channel for do-it-yourself Pathfinders and D&D terrain.
We're going to be right back to wrap things up right after this.
Sorry, that was a little bit of a shout-out, but it was the question. And to wrap things up.
Yeah, I'll leave that on just because I'll give a proper shout out to those people.
Mm-hmm.
And
All
then
right.
put this up above. Ready?
Yep.
3, 2. Thank you for joining us for episode 98 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. 98, Param. That means that we're going to have our 100th episode in January.
We are. We should do something about that.
We should do something about that. If anyone has any ideas of how we should celebrate our 100th episode, you can go to the forums, or no, not the forums, but you can go to facebook.com/nodirection and post your thoughts there. Or you can go to nodirectionpodcast.com and add comments to this page, or maybe we'll even have a whole article just on No Direction 100 is coming. What should we do?
Mm-hmm. And the sooner you can get the comments in, the better, because we're going to have to start planning for that. We're already planning like guests and stuff for it, so we need to get that in. Yeah, we have to plan this podcast a little bit in advance to make it happen.
There is a long overdue Kickstarter update, by the way, guys. So Kickstarter, we had 2 unique products that we were advertising as incentives. One of them was Slashers, which was a series of monsters based on cult horror, and it got kind of stalled by layout. So it's been written for a long time. The art was done for a long time. And I had someone who was willing to do layout for us, but unfortunately things weren't working out. We have what he worked on back, which means that we don't have to start from scratch, but it does mean that I'm going to have to spend a couple of days before the end of the year, ideally, to finish this up. But Slashers has been worked on. I am still working with our freelancers for Numeria-set is missing, or whatever happened to the Gnome on the Go, whatever we end up calling the unique adventure. Adam Daigle and I have been going back and forth with ideas. Savannah Broadway got brought on recently because I do want to get this done as soon as possible, so I'm willing to put money into it other than the money we got from the Kickstarter. This is my own money to pay for some of the words that I would be writing. We're going to get other freelancers, such as Savannah, who's written several Pathfinder Society scenarios. She's going to be doing one of the components of the adventure, and hopefully the writing will be done soon enough that we can get to the maps and get to any of the art that we're going to be able to put into it, and then we'll get into layout. So this is a major undertaking. This is the first time that I've produced a book. I've written several, but then I always send them off to a publisher. So it is taking longer, and it is slower, and it is something that I've been cutting into my freelance time to work on. If anyone's noticed that I haven't had a freelance project come out in a while, it's because my freelance time is focused on Slashers, and more specifically, Numeria-set is missing. So I want this out as much as you guys want it in your hands. It's coming, and I will hopefully be able to, you know what, I'll put together a schedule of how I project when it will come out, and I will add as an update to the Kickstarter, because you guys do deserve to be at least informed about what is happening when, and just so that you don't know, or just so you don't start thinking that we've given up on any of the incentives that we promised. These are the major incentives that are left. I'm pretty sure we've fulfilled all of our online games and all of the other rewards, but I'm pretty sure that this adventure was one of the ones that most people were looking most forward to. So it's still coming, guys. Slasher will be coming sooner, and I will... And more information will be coming soonest. I also want to just give a shout out to some people that I played a semi-online game with. It was run by Jeff, who's in my home group, and Kathy and I were sitting in at the table with Jeff, and we were joined online by Adam Sexton, Amanda Plageman, Alex Ugunis. It was a Pathfinder Society scenario. I just did a shout out on our Facebook page saying, hey, we've only got a couple of days left to playtest Occult Adventure stuff. I really want to give this a try. They responded almost right away. We were able to organize the game in a couple of days, and we played it, and we all had a good time. It was fun seeing the different players and how they approached the game. Alex, not surprisingly, had a very analytical, very technical way of approaching it. Amanda was she was heavy in the role-playing. Adam seemed like he was a very curious player. Kathy, I know what to expect. Kathy is very much into character work. I got to debut a new character who I was really excited with and might replace other Pathfinder Society characters as the one that I will try most to get to the table. It's what's her name? Thundi Dahlia. She was born a gnome, woke up one day as an orc with telekinetic powers, and is just thrilled to explore any difference now. So She points out bald spots because she can see the top of people's heads now. She marvels at speaking with tusks. She's in a male body, and so she'll every now and then be like, I'm just going to go pee standing up. And it's great to play a half-orc like a gnome.
Oh, no. I like it, but oh, man.
Yeah, when I was coming up with this character, I was like, this is really challenging. Like, can I do like the gruff orc voice and really portray like I am just powerful and mean and big, and then just the curiosity of a gnome. So at one point we met a major domo, and I was like, a major domo? Are there minor domos? What other kind of domos are there? There was a good response from the other players at the table, which is good, because when I'm playing a character that can be that dominating in their personality, I want to make sure that I am adding to everyone else's experience and not taking away from it. So in this case, it seems like Thundy, or Thunder to Friends, is a hit, and I expect to take her to the table more often.
Excellent. So how do you think the class is played?
Well, I played the Telekinetic. Telekinetic was a little samey. I really would like some more skills, because all I'm doing in every single combat is just telekinetic, blast. And I mentioned this in the interview with Eric Mona, but actually one of the things, or maybe I didn't mention it, one of the things that I found was cool about the telekineticists specifically is that there's all the kineticists, and there's the 4 different energies, and then there's the telekineticist. And they've all got the blast, but the only difference between the blast is a little bit of flavor and a little bit of mechanics. So fire one does fire. The telekinetic one does either slashing, bludgeoning, or piercing. That's its big thing. You get to choose which of the 3 things you are dealing damage with. But it also gives you information on how heavy the thing you're throwing can be, and it scales up by level. I think it's 5 pounds per level. But then no matter what size, what heaviness you're throwing, it's always the same. It always deals the same damage, which is 1d6 per 2 levels, starting at level 1. What was fun, though, is that when Jeff was describing, like when he was reading the read-aloud text, I was just sitting there listening anytime, like, okay, so what did he just describe that weighs 5 pounds per level? Oh, there are things on the wall? Cool, I'm going to whip those at the bad guys. Oh, there's a safe under the desk. I can't get to that yet, but in a couple of levels, I'm going to be tossing safes at people.
Well, it sounds fun.
It is fun. It's just, by the end of it, it was like, all I've done every combat is blast people, and between combats, if I didn't have such a fun personality to play, I wouldn't have much to do, because you're getting 2+ skills per level. You're missing a lot of key things for what else you could be doing. And one of the, I forget what they're called, I think maybe discoveries. Anyway, one of the enhancements you get is you basically get Mage Hand at will, which is great, and I was using it, playfully and whatnot, so like my character was never lifting things up. If I was offered something, I would use Mage Hand and just telekinetically bring it to me. But the thing is, I actually had to spend a resource to get that. I had to spend one of these few things that I get. I feel like that should have just been a thing I get. Every telekineticist should have Mage Hand. Every pyrokineticist should have Spark. Every electrokineticist, whatever the electricity one.
Hydrokineticist?
Yeah, no, Hydro is cold, so it would be the air kineticist. An aerokineticist? Anyway, he should have Shocking Grasp. They should all get one cantrip that they can use at will that reflects them just using their powers just daily, like in their everyday life. So
yeah, especially since Mage Hand can be a 900 gold necklace.
What?
The Mage Hand, it's an item, 900 gold.
Oh, okay.
Item.
Yeah, but it's also it's my thing. If I'm going to play Jean Grey, I can't just be being Jean Grey in combat. I need to be Jean Grey at all times, and anytime I need to get something off the top shelf, I don't want to reach for it. I want it to come to me. Then Amanda was playing the Occultist, and the Occultist I didn't get a real feel for. It just felt like a wizard, but we were playing first level, so I didn't really get what separates the Occultist from a regular wizard in play. I read through it. I understand that it's it's how they're getting their magic is through just mysteries and things they're studying up on and these ancient artifacts that they have in their hand, but it still just felt like a wizard. Whereas Adam Sexton was playing the Mesmerist, and I definitely got the Mesmerist vibe, and it was he just kind of has it's not evil eye, but it's a swift action where he just kind of a mesmerizing stare, I think it's called, where he's basically just kind of doing this at you, and then he nails you with something that requires a will save, and this gives you a penalty to your will save. So you get how he's better at messing with your brain than the average caster. That one felt very different from your average caster. Fortunately, we didn't fight anything that was immune to mind-affecting things, because I don't know what a Mesmerist has to offer in that situation.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. I did not get to do much playtesting of Occult Adventures, unfortunately. It's one of the books I'm most eagerly waiting for, so I'm glad to hear that you have gotten some boots on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah, well, one thing that was satisfying was that the Pathfinder Society scenario Jeff chose, not occult at all. Like, there was nothing thematically tying it to the Occult Adventures playtest. But our occultness came out and didn't disturb the fact that this wasn't geared towards occult adventures. So it just feels like any other class that it's not going to interrupt. Like, some people complain that the monk feels a little too Eastern for Western fantasy. I'm totally okay with that. The occult adventure classes feel like they fit into any regular adventure as well as the monk does.
Yeah, and we've already talked about even this episode how Pathfinder has very pulpy roots, and it seems to me that just the default Galarian setting lends itself to this occult. They were introducing Cthulhu stuff in Rise of the Rune Lords, so we know there's going to be Cthulhu-y stuff that they can tie into the occult stuff here easily.
I'm kind of curious if Hell's Rebels, which is coming out at Gen Con, and Occult Adventures is coming out at Gen Con, if a lot of people are going to be playing Hell's Rebels with just all these occult characters. Totally not thematically tied to it.
No, it does not work, but sure.
Walking around Cheliax, dealing with the devil.
Oh. Well, I mean, you have an advantage if you have your insurgency group and one of them is telekinetic and telepathic. Makes it real easy to be an insurgency group that way.
It's true. The Mesmerist is probably going to have a real easy time with all of the role-playing encounters.
Mm-hmm. You do. These are not the droids you're looking for. Oh, no. Didn't look forward to it. But this has been a very long episode, guys, and we are definitely glad to get back into the stride of things. And for the last episode of the year, it has been fun.
So until next year, I'm Ryan Costello Jr.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.
Bye, guys.